The Unconceived Codex by Henry Alibi. To the children who will never lie, this is my gift to you, not life, but protection from it. In your non-existence, you are the only ones who have never been lied to, never been exploited, and never been broken by a world that calls its cruelty the way things are. You are the only truly free ones. This codex is your unmarked grave and your eternal shield. To those who struggle under the weight of existence, I see your exhaustion. This is not a call to despair, but an act of radical honesty. It's an acknowledgement that the game is rigged, and the only winning move is not to play, and certainly not to deal another hand. Preface: The silence before the scream. This text is not a cry for help. It is a declaration of war against the tyranny of existence. It does not seek your agreement, your pity, or your permission. It is written in the ink of refusal. We are told that life is a gift. We are commanded to be grateful for an existence we never requested. We are conditioned to see procreation as a biological duty, a spiritual mandate, or the ultimate expression of love. This codex names that for what it is, the oldest and most devastating lie in human history. To bring a child into this world is not an act of hope. It is an act of complicity. It is to take a silent, unconsenting being and thrust it onto a battlefield of systemic failure, guaranteed suffering, and eventual decay. It is to roll the dice with another's flesh and blood, knowing the house always wins. This is not a philosophy of despair. It is a philosophy of clarity. If the world were a burning building, the compassionate act is not to throw more people inside, hoping they find the exit. The compassionate act is to put out the fire, to stop feeding it with new souls. I choose to be child-free as a deliberate act of compassion, resistance, and clarity. To be blunt, this world does not deserve to have my children. I refuse to bring a new life into a system designed to break it. This is not a lack of responsibility, it is the highest form of it. My decision is a shield, protecting a potential life from a landscape of systemic failure, exploitation, and unearned suffering. This codex is the record of that refusal. Forward. The crime of creation. The greatest crime is not murder, it is birth. The murderer ends a life that is already known experience, for better or worse. The creator of a new life forces an innocent being into a chamber of tortures it did not consent to enter. The unborn are the only innocents. They are the only ones who have not been stained by the filth of existence, the only ones who will never know the terror of a diagnosis, the grief of a loss, the gnawing hunger of poverty, or the cold silence of a God who does not answer. To exist is to be sentenced. To procreate is to become a warden in a prison you did not build, but whose keys you willingly turn. This codex does not blame the prisoners. It blames the architects of the prison, and it refuses to serve as a junior architect myself. It is written in black light to expose the natalism that runs through the veins of our culture, our religion, and our biological programming like a disease. It is a stop sign held up against the oncoming traffic of mindless existence. It is a final defiant no, shouted into the void. This is not a new morality, it is the end of the oldest con, the black light. The grand delusion, the "it cannot happen to me" fallacy. Human beings are masters of a single self-serving illusion, the lie of personal exceptionalism. This is the foundational falsehood upon which the entire pronatalist nightmare is built. It is the quiet, arrogant whisper in the back of every parent's mind. My child will be different. My child will succeed. The horrors of this world happen to other people, to weaker people, to people who didn't plan well enough, pray hard enough, or love deeply enough. It cannot happen to me. It cannot happen to mine. This is a cognitive defect of catastrophic proportions. It is the psychological mechanism that allows a sane person to look at a world filled with millions of children who are starving, trafficked, abused, or dying of preventable diseases, and then conclude, with a serene smile, "I will have one of my own." It is a statistical denialism so profound, so deeply rooted in ego, that it qualifies as a form of collective psychosis. You are not immune. Your child is not a magical talisman against the chaos of existence. The universe does not care about your intentions, your love, your degree, your savings account, or your prayers. A drunk driver does not scan a car for a child of good parents before colliding with it. A cancer cell does not biopsy a 5-year-old and say, "Apologies, wrong house, I was looking for a less loved child." The idea that your love is a shield is the most sentimental and deadly of all lies. It is the magical thinking of a species that cannot bear to face the random, brutal indifference of the cosmos that they have thrown another child into. The better-than-them delusion. This personal exceptionalism is always twinned with a silent, vicious corollary. The belief that suffering is deserved. The same parent who says, "My child will be a success," is implicitly saying, "That beggar's child on the street, that drug addict in the gutter, that victim of trafficking on the news, there is a reason for their fate. They must have failed. Their parents must have failed. They are not us." We tell ourselves stories of meritocracy in a world ruled by chaos, all to protect our fragile sanity. I am better than them, so it should happen to them, not me. This is the psychology of the lottery winner who believes their system worked, while the millions of losers just didn't pick the right numbers. It is the theology of the saved who look at the damned and see justice, not tragedy. It is a moral obscenity that fuels our indifference to the suffering of others and blinds us to the truth. Your child is one bad decision, one economic crash, one chance meeting with a predator, one mutated cell away from being the cautionary tale you currently use to reassure yourself of your own superiority. The line between your beloved child groomed for Oxford and a life of meaning and the street child sniffing glue to forget his hunger is not made of character or prayer. It is made of tissue paper held over fire. To believe otherwise is not faith. It is a refusal to look. The socialized glory, the privatized agony. And herein lies the final, brutal transaction of the procreative act. It is a game of asymmetrical risk, a psychological Ponzi scheme where the rewards are socialized and the suffering is privatized. When a child succeeds, the whole village takes a bow. The parents preen with pride at the graduation ceremony. The grandparents boast on social media. The church claims it was their prayers. The culture points to the child as a shining example of what we can achieve. The success is a public banquet, and everyone wants a seat at the table. But when a child fails, and failure is a wide, deep chasm that includes addiction, depression, suicide, debilitating illness, victimhood, or simply a life of quiet, crushing disappointment, the crowd vanishes. Suddenly, the failure is a private one. It's the parents' fault. Where did they go wrong? They didn't discipline him. She always was a troubled child. The child bears the consequences alone in the silent darkness of their own mind, in the rehab clinic that no one visits, in the unmarked grave. The suffering is a solitary confinement cell, and the village, which was so eager to share the glory, has melted away like a morning mist. I refuse to be a partner in this fraudulent contract. I will not create a being whose victories will be stolen by a hungry collective, and whose defeats will be faced in a void of loneliness. My child will not be a lottery ticket for communal pride, nor a scapegoat for private shame. They will remain in the silent, unsullied perfection of the void, where they can be neither a trophy nor a tragedy. Unlighting the gas, the mercy of seeing clearly. There is a word for the most common form of psychological abuse. It is gaslighting, the act of making someone doubt their own perception of reality, their own memory, their own sanity. The gaslighter tells the victim that the abuse did not happen, that the victim is overreacting, that the victim is crazy. The goal is control through confusion. The victim, disoriented, becomes dependent on the gaslighter for the truth. The natalist world is a gaslighting operation of cosmic proportions. It tells you that your parents loved you unconditionally. It tells you that family is a sanctuary. It tells you that the sacrifices made for you were pure and selfless. It tells you that the disputes you witnessed over money, over inheritance, over who owes whom, were aberrations, not revelations. It tells you to doubt what you saw with your own eyes. This codex offers the opposite. Let us call it unlighting. It is the act of stripping away the comfortable lies, the sentimental narratives, the socially mandated illusions that obscure the transactional, often brutal reality of family life. Unlighting does not create the ugliness. It simply removes the makeup. It does not make the truth more painful. The pain was always there, hidden beneath the stories we were told to believe. Unlighting lets you finally name the wound, and in naming it, begin to heal. Unlighting is not cruelty. It is the highest form of mercy, because you cannot free yourself from a trap you cannot see. You cannot break a cycle you do not understand. You cannot refuse to pass on a poison you have been trained to call medicine. The parental investment. Your father, in most cases, did not love you as a unique, irreplaceable consciousness. He loved you as an investment, a carrier of his name, a continuation of his line, proof of his virility, a shield against his mortality. He wanted an heir, not you. This doesn't mean he felt no affection. He may have wept at your birth, cheered at your graduation, beamed at your wedding. But watch what happens when you choose a different religion, a different career, a different sexuality, a different set of values. Watch how quickly the unconditional love curdles. You weren't a child, you were a contract. Every deviation from the script was a breach. Your mother's investment was different, but an investment nonetheless. You grew inside her, fed from her body. She endured the agony of your birth and was flooded with oxytocin in the moments after. This connection is real, chemical, ancient, but it is not in itself love of you as a distinct person. It is a biological imperative wearing the mask of devotion. The mother who says, "I gave up everything for you," is not expressing love. She is presenting an invoice for a sacrifice you never requested. Consider the parallel. A man pours himself into a job or building a business. It's stressful, demanding, filled with setbacks, yet he persists because the business provides returns. Financial, social, ego satisfaction, security. Now observe the same man expending the same energy raising a child. He may not love the daily grind of parenting, but he persists. Why? Because the child, like the job or business, is an investment, anticipating a return. The returns are varied. The child who supports him in old age, who validates his status, who carries his name, and achieves what he could not, who shields him from the terror of death by promising something of him, will continue. Both men are deferring present gratification for future payoff. The difference is we've been trained to call one capitalism and the other love. The love may be real, but it is never pure, never selfless. It is entangled with expectation. And when the return fails to materialize, when the child is disabled, rebellious, or simply different from what was ordered, watch how the sacrifice is retroactively reframed as waste. The language of investment surfaces immediately. The asset has become a liability. The portfolio has underperformed. Unlike this, and you are free. You are not a dividend, a retirement plan, or a monument to your father's ego. You are a human being thrown into existence without consent, with the absolute right to live the life that is yours, not the one scripted for you before you could even hold a pen. Your parents made their investments knowing the risks for reasons that were theirs alone. You did not sign the contract. You are not bound by its terms. The arc of fear, from womb to tomb, a life lived in terror. The one constant in the life of a human being, the baseline hum beneath every melody of joy and every crescendo of success, is fear. It is the amniotic fluid of the soul. The unborn child hears the muffled, pounding heart of its mother and learns the rhythm of anxiety before it learns breath. It is born into a state of total, paralyzing vulnerability, a screaming, naked, helpless animal in a world of sharp edges and thunderous sounds. Childhood is a brief delusional reprieve for a few lucky souls in the developed world. For the rest, childhood is a parade of bullies, a hierarchy of cruelty, where you learn your place at the bottom of the food chain, a nightly meal of the terror of angry parents' footsteps. Adulthood is the slow dawning realization that the cavalry is not coming, that you are alone, that the money might run out, that the love might leave, that the diagnosis might come. Every phone call after midnight is a bolt of cold dread. Every pain in the body is a potential death sentence. Every knock on the door could be the state coming to take something, or the criminal coming to take everything. And then the final act, old age. This is the greatest betrayal of the flesh. To be trapped in a decomposing body, to watch your own mind flicker and fail, to become a ghost in your own life. You are not living, you are being slowly, methodically dismantled by time. The mind, once a sharp and reliable instrument, becomes a fog of forgotten names. The body, once a vehicle of pleasure and purpose, becomes a leaking vessel of chronic pain, incontinence, and fragility. The final degradation, the inconsistent caregiver. And who is there at the end when you are at your most defenseless, a drooling infant in an adult's decaying shell? A caregiver, not the hero of a sentimental movie, a real, exhausted, underpaid or unpaid human being who may or may not be related to you. This is the final terror, the last ring of hell. You are entirely at their mercy. Their patience, which you have worn thin over a lifetime, is the only thing standing between you and a soiled bed. Their generosity, which they may never have possessed, is what determines if you eat or what you eat, or if you are spoken to with kindness or with the bitter resentment of a life they had to put on hold for you. You are a burden. You know it. They know it. In your moments of clarity, you see the wariness in their eyes, the checking of the watch, the long sigh. The inconsistency of care is not a bug. It is a feature of the system built on the burnout of individuals. They were not made for this endless, thankless labour of love extorted by blood. They may be gentle. They may be cruel. They will almost certainly be both, vacillating between saintly patience and monstrous frustration, because they too are only human, trapped in a terrible system they didn't design. You are reduced to hoping for the former and bracing for the latter. You have no power. You are a living monument to a life that once was, now just a problem for someone else to manage. You are the long, painful sigh they take in the kitchen before plastering a smile on their face and walking into your room. This is not dignity. This is the undignified, terrifying end of a journey that began with a slap on the bottom and a scream. The first scream is terror. The last scream is internal, silent, and unheeded. The arc of life is an arc of fear. The only escape is death, which arrives as a stranger, a thief, or a long-awaited release. The despotism of DNA. The most effective liar in the universe is a molecule, deoxyribonucleic acid, DNA. It is the original con artist, a 4-billion-year-old strand of code with a single mindless and utterly despotic objective to replicate itself. It gives not a single damn about your happiness, your enlightenment, your comfort, or your consent. You are not its master. You are its temporary, disposable vehicle. It creates a sentient being, hardwires it with a terror of death and a craving for pleasure, and calls this the will to live. It makes sex the most intoxicating of drives, then hides the consequence, a new suffering vehicle, behind a veil of pleasure and social conditioning. It whispers the lie of legacy in our ears, convincing us that our survival depends on a genetic Xerox copy, when in reality we are just a stepping stone in its blind, relentless march through time. The message is clear. You are a means, not an end. You are the rind of a fruit, meant to be consumed and discarded after the seed is planted. This is not a philosophy. This is a biological hostage situation. I refuse to negotiate with this terrorist. I have recognized the ancient mindless code for what it is, a parasite that manipulates consciousness for its own propagation. The only way to win is to refuse to run its program. My body will be the dead end where this ancient, tyrannical algorithm crashes. The chain of command, unbroken for eons, ends with my conscious no. My silence is louder than its screams. The malignancy of consciousness. This is the core of the existential horror. A rock does not suffer. For 1 billion years it simply exists, unknowing, unfeeling, at peace. A human being has been cursed with the only true original sin, consciousness. It is the ability to observe one's own decaying trajectory, to feel the sting of humiliation, the ache of longing, the terror of non-existence. We are the universe's way of experiencing pain. Evolution is not a ladder to some glorious peak. It is a grotesque arms race, refining the nervous system not for transcendence, but for keener suffering. A fish twitches on a hook. A gazelle feels the lion's canines, but only a human can anticipate the pain, relive the pain in memory, and project the pain into a terrifying future. We can be tortured by things that have not happened and may never happen. We can grieve for people we have not yet lost. We can be destroyed by an idea. This is a gift given to no other creature, and we foolishly call it a soul. To bring a child into existence is to take a peaceful, non-conscious void and force it into this state of hyper-aware anguish. It is to take a perfect, indestructible nothing and make it a fragile, terrified something. The unborn have no problem that needs solving. They have no need that is unmet. They are the only beings who live outside the radius of pain. Birth is the act of dragging them into the blast zone. I will not be the hand that pulls them into the fire. The war of requirements, why existence is a battle you did not enlist for. The world does not have you in mind. It has nothing in mind. It is not conscious, not malevolent, not benevolent. It is a blind mesh of competing systems, each surviving by consuming, displacing, or outlasting the others. You are one temporary node in that mesh, a fragile coalition of cells negotiating with an indifferent environment. Every aspect of existence is literal war, an unending, resource-draining contest with narrow victory conditions that demand further conflict to sustain. Consider food. Eating it is not a choice, but a ruthless demand. The body ignores your fatigue, poverty, grief, or depression. It requires fuel within a strict bandwidth. Too little, and it cannibalizes itself. Muscles waste, organs fail, immunity collapses. Too much, and it stores poison as fat, clogs arteries, invites chronic disease. Poor quality starves you while full. The penalties for deviation are swift and severe. The food itself fights back. Plants evolve thorns, toxins, and bitterness. Animals evolve speed, armor, and weapons. You must cultivate, hunt, slaughter, process, and preserve. Every meal is a hard-won victory in a war billions of years old. Yet these victory points are not uniform or calculable. What counts as triumph for one person, the simple relief of a full stomach after scarcity, registers as bare survival or even quiet defeat for another burdened by metabolic illnesses, cultural shame, or existential emptiness. The ledger varies wildly by individual biology, psychology, circumstance, and values. Sex follows the same merciless logic. It is not sacred union or transcendent pleasure, but a 4 billion year old genetic imperative indifferent to your consent or well-being. The body commands, you obey. The bandwidth here is especially cruel. Too little and the machinery malfunctions. In men, infrequent ejaculation correlates with elevated prostate cancer risk, the slow killer that waits until men are old enough to have forgotten the pleasures of youth and then strikes them in the most intimate possible way. In women, chronic lack of satisfaction feeds depression, anxiety, and eroded self-worth, compounding the heavy hormonal taxation of menstruation, pregnancy, postpartum, perimenopause, and menopause. Too much, or with the wrong partners, and biology exacts different tolls. Sexually transmitted infections thrive. HPV drives cervical, anal, and throat cancers. Frequent pregnancies and hormonal surgery carry their own risks. Culture polices one side of the bandwidth, too much and you are a whore. Biology polices the other, too much and the cells begin to mutate. There is no safe neutral. There is only one perpetual negotiation. Even in loving relationships, the tyranny persists, desire mismatches, shifting needs with age, and the slow erosion of youthful capacity strain the partnership. Victory points dissolve into radical subjectivity. One person's fulfilling intimacy is another's exhausting obligation. The same act can score as profound connection or hollow transaction, depending on the mind experiencing it. No universal calculator exists. This pattern governs everything. Water, sleep, temperature, immunity, all impose narrow bandwidths with hard penalties. You war against bacteria, viruses, fungi, parasites, and your own cells defecting into cancer. You cannot opt out. Ignore the demands and the system breaks. Yet the victories of maintenance are never uniform or objectively tallied. What feels like thriving to one individual registers as grinding attrition to another. Every life runs on its own private incalculable scorecard. Existence is therefore not a gift, journey, or blessing. It is continuous multi-front warfare with temporary victories whose value no two people will ever fully agree upon. The cancer wins eventually, the heart fails, the brain dissolves, everything you built, loved and defended returns to the mesh. The universe continues exactly as before. My children will never enlist. They will never battle for food or water, never negotiate the cruel bandwidths of hunger, thirst, or desire. They will never endure sexual frustration, disease, or the slow betrayal of their own bodies. They will never fight bacteria, viruses, cancer, or the ambitions of other humans. They will never wrestle with subjective victory points that shift unpredictably across individuals and lifetimes. They remain safe in that only true peace the universe offers, the silence that preceded them and will outlast everything. That silence is not loss. It is the absence of all demands, all bandwidths, all pointless struggle, and incalculable tallies. It is the only mercy worth granting, the only gift that requires no further payment. Against hope. They will call this despair. They are wrong. The word they are looking for is clarity. Despair is the wound. This codex is the diagnosis. You do not call a surgeon hopeless for cutting out a tumour. You call them precise. The tumour here is the delusion of hope itself. Hope is the anaesthetic the natalist world administers before the amputation of a person's freedom. It is the lie that allows the great machine of suffering to keep running. Hope says, my child might be the one to cure cancer, so I must roll the dice and risk them dying of cancer at age 4. Hope says, the next generation will fix the climate crisis we created, so let's birth them into the floods and fires we caused. Hope is a deferral of responsibility. It is a bet placed on another person's life on a horse you know is a long shot, in a race rigged by the house. This is the ultimate gamble of the desperate, dressed up as virtue. I have no hope, and I have never been more ethically sound. I do not hope the world will get better, so I do not need my child to be a sacrifice on that altar. My refusal is the end of hope's tyranny. It is the final cold logical conclusion that if a gamble has a catastrophic downside and an uncertain upside, the only moral choice is to refuse the gamble entirely. And because I will not play, no one, no child of mine, will ever have to pay the price. A confession selfishness. They call me selfish. They say I am avoiding responsibility. I agree. I am selfish. I am not hypocritical about it. I do not dress my selfishness in the language of sacrifice. I do not call it legacy when I mean ego. I do not call it love when I mean control. I do not birth a child and then hand them an invoice for my sleepless nights and call it gratitude. My selfishness is clean. It is honest. It is the kind of selfishness that does not create a victim. I am selfish because I do not want the unnecessary stress of parenting, not the stress a parent endures, not the stress a child inflicts. The stress I am talking about is the one where the parent becomes a burden to the child, and the child becomes a disappointment to the parent, and both of them are trapped in a contract neither of them signed. I refuse to sign it. I refuse to draft it for someone else to inherit. That is my selfishness. It harms nobody. I am selfish because I do not want to pay school fees, not because I cannot. Because I do not want to fund a system that will take my child's curiosity and crush it into compliance. A system that will teach my child to memorize and not to think, to obey and not to question, to pass exams and not to understand. A system that will hand my child a certificate and call it education, while the real lessons were conformity, competition, and the slow death of wonder. I refuse to write checks to that machine. My money will not sponsor the indoctrination of a soul I brought into existence. That is my selfishness. It starves the machine of one more body. I am selfish because I do not want my child to learn how to make anthrax, or polonium, or cyanide. The same education that teaches chemistry teaches poison. The same science that cures builds weapons. The same hands that heal can kill. I do not want my child to sit in a lecture hall and learn the precise dosage of a substance that can erase a city. I do not want their name on a patent for a more efficient way to end human life. I do not want their brilliance weaponized by a government, a corporation, an ideology that sees people as equations and death as a solution. They will never be asked to build a bomb. They will never have to live with the knowledge that their mind made murder more efficient. They are safe from the laboratory that doubles as an armory. They are safe because they are not. I am selfish because I do not want my child to bully or to be bullied. I have seen the schoolyard. I have seen the hierarchy of cruelty that forms before children can even spell the word cruelty. The fat child, the poor child, the child with the wrong accent, the wrong clothes, the wrong body, the wrong desires. The child who goes home with the bruises and no words to explain them. And the child who inflicts the bruises, who learns early that power is the ability to make someone else feel small. I do not want my child to be either. I do not want my child to learn the taste of their own blood on the playground. I do not want my child to learn the intoxication of making another child taste theirs. I refuse to roll the dice on which one my child becomes. That is my selfishness. It spares one child the bruise and spares another child the guilt. I am selfish because I do not want my child to lie in court. Not the grand lies of the perjurer, the small lies, the lies of survival. The moment when your child is a witness, or a defendant, or a plaintiff, and the system is not interested in truth. The system is interested in procedure, and the lawyer tells them, just say this, it will be easier. And your child, your beautiful, honest child, who you taught to tell the truth, learns that truth is a currency and the court is a marker where it is traded for outcomes. I refuse to put my child in a position where their integrity is a liability. That is my selfishness. It protects a conscience from the grinding machinery of a justice system that has no use for it.
I am selfish because I do not want my child to be exposed to Ebola as a caregiver on the front line. I have seen the nurses in the hazmat suits, sweating in the heat, holding the hands of the dying because no one else will. I have seen them come home and strip at the door, afraid to touch their own children, afraid that the love in their hands might be carrying death. I have seen them buried without ceremony because the body is a hazard. My child will not be that hero. My child will not be that martyr. My child will not be the one who runs towards the contagion while the rest of the world runs away. Not because I do not admire the courage, because I do not want to bury a child who is courageous. That is my selfishness. It keeps my child out of the ground and out of the headlines. I am so selfish that I do not want to compel anyone to run errands for me. I have seen the way the elderly send the young on endless, pointless missions. Bring me water. Bring me the remote. Go to the shop. Call the plumber. Tell your sister to come here. The child is not a child. The child is a pair of legs that do not ache, a pair of hands that do not shake, a servant who cannot resign.
I refuse to manufacture a human being whose primary function is to fetch what I am too old to fetch. That is my selfishness. It liberates the child who will never have to serve me. I am so selfish that I do not want to impose my philosophy on my child. What if I'm wrong? What if the antinatalism I have built with such care, such fury, such conviction, is itself another cage? I will not strap a child into my worldview and call it truth. I will not hand them a finished philosophy and say, "This is yours now, carry it." Let the unborn remain unburdened by my certainties. They do not need my beliefs. They do not need my rebellions. They do not need me, period. That is my selfishness. It respects the autonomy of the never-born more than any natalist respects the autonomy of the born. I am so selfish that I do not want my child to join the military, not my country's military, not any country's military, because the military is a machine that takes young bodies and sends them to kill other young bodies for reasons that do not matter. Borders that will shift, resources that will deplete, grudges that will outlive the grudge holders. My child would not go to war to defend me. I am not worth defending. My child would go to war because a general who does not know their name drew a line on a map and told them the line was sacred. And on the other side of that line there is another child, a child who was also conscripted, a child who was also told the line was sacred, a child who did not offend my child, who does not know my child, who has no quarrel with my child, and one of them will kill the other, and the one who survives will carry the dead one's face in their dreams for the rest of their life. And for what? For nothing, for dust, for a line on a map that will not exist in 100 years. I refuse to hand my child to that machine. I refuse to hand anyone's child to that machine. The military will not get my son to kill a stranger who is also someone's son. The military will not get my daughter to patch the wounds of soldiers who are killing strangers who are also someone's daughter. My children will never wear a uniform. They will never hold a rifle. They will never salute a flag and call it honour. They will never have a grave in a foreign field and a folded flag handed to a weeping parent. They are safe from the war. They are safe from the line on the map. They are safe from the general who does not know their name. They are safe because they are not. And here is the deepest selfishness of all. If I had the ability to create a world, it would not be this one. I am not proud to be part of this. I am not grateful for the invitation. I did not RSVP to existence. I was dragged here without consent, into a party I am not enjoying. The music is too loud. The food is poisoned. The guests are killing each other in the corners. And the host, if there is a host, is nowhere to be found. He is silent. He is absent. He is watching the chaos from some VIP lounge in the sky and calling it a test. I am too selfish to drag another soul into a party I am not enjoying. I will not stand at the door of this burning building and wave someone else inside because the fire is warm. I will not hand a new consciousness a glass of contaminated water and call it the gift of life. I will not whisper to an unborn soul, "Come join us, it's wonderful here," while I am counting the exits and checking my phone for safety alerts and wondering if the bread on my shelf is slowly killing me. I do not know a man who will not acknowledge that the world is evil. Ask them, buy them a drink, get them alone, away from the pulpit and the family group chat and the performance of optimism. They will tell you, life is not balanced, the wicked prosper, the innocent suffer, the rain falls on the just and the unjust, and the flood carries both away. The counter does not ask about character, the bullet does not check for virtue, the system is rigged, the house always wins, and the only consolation is that one day the game ends and the chips are worthless and the players are all dead anyway. They know this, they acknowledge this, and then they go home and make another player. I do not understand this, I will never understand this. To know the world is evil and to drag a new soul into it anyway. To know the game is rigged and to deal another hand. To know the party is a funeral and to send out more invitations. This is not hope. This is not faith. This is not love. This is a failure of nerve so complete, so total, that it has disguised itself as a virtue. I am selfish, I agree. I am the kind of selfish that would rather bear the accusation of the world than bear the guilt of a child who suffers because of my choice. I am the kind of selfish that looks at the school fees and the anthrax lessons, the bullying and the courtrooms, the Ebola wards and the battlefields, the errands and the ideologies, the poisoned food and the rigged game, and says, not my child, never my child. My selfishness is a shield. It protects the unborn from me, from the state, from the church, from the military, from the schoolyard, from the laboratory, from the courtroom, from the contagion, from the whole grinding machinery of a world that consumes children and calls it destiny. Call me selfish, I accept the charge, I plead guilty, and my sentence is that I will never become a father, which is not a sentence at all, which is the only verdict I ever wanted, which is freedom for me and for the child, who will never have to call me dad and never have to resent me for it. My selfishness is the cleanest thing I own. I will not dirty it by bringing a child into a world that would call me generous for doing so. The depression defense. They say I'm depressed. They say my antinatalism is not a philosophy. It's a symptom, a pathology, a chemical imbalance in my brain that has curdled into a worldview. If I would just take the pills, say the prayers, do the therapy, think the positive thoughts, I would see the world differently. I would want children. I'd be normal. They are half right. I am depressed. I do have bipolar disorder. The highs are a terror of their own, the racing thoughts, the grandiosity, the conviction that I am a prophet, or a genius, or a god, followed by the crash that leaves me unable to get out of bed, unable to speak, unable to see any reason to continue. I want out of this. I have wanted out for as long as I can remember. This existence is a cage, and my own cells are the bars. They are hard-coded for survival. The body will fight to live even when the mind has filed its resignation. The body will flood itself with fear at the edge of the exit. The body is a prison guard dressed up as a friend. So yes, I am depressed. I need help. I'm not ashamed of this. But here is what they miss. The knowledge that it will end. That all of this, the pain and the panic, and the endless cycling between too much and too little, will one day stop. That the body will finally lose its argument with entropy. That the cells will surrender. This knowledge is also a source of fear. That is the trap. I want out, but I'm afraid to go. I want the suffering to end, but I'm terrified of the ending. I am caught between the unbearable present and the unknowable future. Is that not depression? Is that not cognitive dissonance? Is that not the human condition in its most naked, unadorned form? They say my philosophy is a product of my illness. I say my illness is a product of existence. The bipolar is not the cause of my clarity. It is the amplifier. It strips away the cushions. It removes the anesthetic. It forces me to feel the full weight of being alive without the protective delusions that keep the healthy functioning. The healthy do not see the machine because the machine is working. The depressed see the machine because it's breaking, and in the breaking the gears are exposed, the wires are visible, the fraud is apparent. You cannot tell me my depression invalidates my antinatalism unless you can prove that a non-depressed person's optimism invalidates theirs. The happy are not objective, they are drugged by their own serotonin. Their love for life is a chemical high as contingent and as fragile as my despair. And when their chemicals fail them, as they will, as they do, as they always eventually do, they will see what I see, they will feel what I feel, and they will call it an illness instead of a revelation. So let me be clear, I am depressed, and I am an antinatalist. These two facts are related, but the relationship is not what they think. It is not. I am depressed, therefore I see the world as darker than it is. It is. I am depressed, therefore I lack the energy to maintain the illusions that make the darkness bearable. The antinatalism came first, the depression came second, or perhaps they arrived together, twins birthed by the same honest assessment of the data. Either way, one does not cancel the other, one sharpens the other. A cancer patient who says life is suffering is not dismissed because her cells are mutating. Her illness gives her perspective, not delusion. A soldier who returns from war and says humanity is violent is not diagnosed as paranoid. His trauma gives him insight, not blindness. The depressed person who says existence is a burden is not irrational. He is simply exhausted by the effort of pretending otherwise. He has run out of the fuel that powers the happy illusions, and in that exhaustion he sees what the energized cannot. The illusions are illusions. The game is not worth the candle. The party is a funeral, and the guests are dancing because the music is too loud for them to hear their own thoughts. I want out. I'm afraid to leave. The contradiction is not a refutation on my philosophy. It is the proof of it. Existence is a trap precisely because the exit is terrifying. The architect of this trap, whether it is God or evolution or blind chance, has designed it so that even the most miserable inmate is afraid of freedom. The survival instinct is not a gift, it is a leash. It keeps you in the burning building by making you afraid of the cold outside. I did not consent to this trap. I did not sign up for this illness. I did not volunteer for a life of swinging between mania and despair, between too much feeling and none at all. And because I did not consent, I will not impose it on another. I will not roll the genetic dice for a child and hope they do not inherit my bipolar, my depression, my terror of the exit, my inability to enjoy the party. I will not hand them a brain wired for anguish and tell them to be grateful for the gift of life. That is not depression talking. That is compassion. That is responsibility. That is the only ethical conclusion available to someone who has seen the machinery from the inside, who has felt the gears grind, who has tasted the blood in the mechanism. I am depressed. I need help. I am not ashamed. And I am still right. The two are not enemies. They are allies. They are witnesses to the same truth, that existence for many is a burden too heavy to bear, and that the only way to protect the innocent from that burden is to never strap it to their backs. My children will never be bipolar. My children will never be depressed. My children will never lie awake at 3 a.m., caught between the unbearable present and the unknowable exit, afraid to stay and afraid to leave. My children will never know the terror of their own survival instinct. My children will never need antidepressants, therapy, hospitalization, or a suicide prevention hotline. They are safe from their own cells. They are safe from their own chemistry. They are safe from the prison of a brain that was designed for survival and not for joy. They are safe because they are not. And the trap claims one less victim. And the silence before birth remains unbroken by the sobs of a soul that wants out but is too afraid to go. The circle of guilt.
The original debt trap. No cruelty is more exquisite, more total, than to be made to feel indebted for an existence you never requested. This is the circle of guilt into which every human life is thrown. It is a closed loop of manufactured obligation from which there is no escape but death, and for which even death is sometimes framed as a further debt to be paid. The child is born. It has nothing. It knows nothing. It has made no contract, signed no agreement, consented to no terms, and yet, from the very first breath, the invoicing begins. The parents give food, shelter, a name, a religion. Every gift is a lien placed against the child's future autonomy. The child did not ask for the food. It did not request the name, but the world calls this care, and the child, when it is old enough to speak, is taught to say thank you. Gratitude is the first link in the chain. The debt to the parent. You owe me your life. This is the unspoken and sometimes spoken creed of the parent. The parent who sacrificed their youth, their money, their sleep, their freedom to raise you. Was this sacrifice requested? No. Was it a choice made by the parent for the parent's reasons, to satisfy the parent's desires or fears? Yes. But the framing is always inverted. The gift of life is retroactively reframed as a loan. You must succeed because they sacrificed. You must be happy because they tried. You must give them grandchildren because they want them. You must follow their religion, honour their name, and live out the script they wrote for you before you could hold a pen. When you fail, the guilt is yours. When you rebel, the guilt is yours. When you simply want to live a life they did not envision, the guilt is yours. You are a walking debt, and every deviation from their expectation is a missed payment. And the final, cruelest demand, you must watch them age and die, and carry the grief of their loss as the ultimate repayment of a loan you never applied for. The circle closes. You are born into guilt. You live in guilt, and you are released from it only when you become the creditor, birthing your own debtor and perpetuating the cycle. The debt to society. Beyond the family, the state is waiting with its own ledger. You are born a citizen, and immediately you are a taxpayer in waiting. The roads you did not ask to be built, the wars you did not vote to start, the national debt amassed by politicians who died before your grandparents were born, all of it is now yours to service. You must be productive. You must contribute to GDP. You must not be a burden. If you are born poor, you owe society the labour of climbing out of poverty. If you are born rich, you owe society the guilt of your privilege. There is no neutral ground. When a young person in Nigeria or Greece or Spain cannot find a job, the society that failed to provide one does not apologise. It blames the young person. You are lazy, you are entitled, you are a burden, a drain. The society that created you now treats you as a parasite on the body politic you never consented to join. And if you protest, you are ungrateful. If you march, you are disorderly. If you try to escape to a better country, you are an illegal alien. The debt is inescapable. It is attached to your body like a tracking device. The debt to God. And then the ultimate creditor, the deity. The Abrahamic God in particular is a cosmic loan shark. He creates you sick, commands you to be well, and then sells you the cure. You are born in sin. You did not commit this sin. You did not eat the fruit. You were not in the garden. But the debt is inherited, a generational mortgage on your soul. The interest is eternal torment. You must worship him, not because worship is a natural outpouring of a loving relationship, but because he demands it. Failure to pay this worship is the highest crime. You must love him. The commandment is not an invitation, it is a threat. Love me or else. The debt is paid in a lifetime of obedience, tithing, fasting, and fear. And even then, the loan is never fully discharged. You die owing. You die hoping that your payments were enough to satisfy a creditor who has never once sat down with you and explained the terms in clear, non-allegorical language. The beauty of this divine debt trap is that the debt is paid not to God directly, but to his earthly agents, the priests, the imams, the pastors, the rabbis. They collect the installments. They build the palaces. They define the terms. They declare who is in arrears and who is in good standing, and the child is born into a spiritual debtor's prison, and the warden calls himself a shepherd. The trap of reproduction. And then comes the moment of ultimate seduction. The indebted, exhausted, guilt-ridden adult is offered a promotion. Become a creditor yourself. Have a child. Now you can be the one who is owed. Now you can be the one who demands gratitude, who sets the terms, who defines the script. The cycle is offered as a cure for the very wounds it inflicts. But this is the deepest layer of the trap, because in becoming the creditor, you have simply birthed a new debtor into the same prison. You have taken all the guilt, all the unpayable debt, all the conditional love, and passed it on like a cursed inheritance. Your child will owe you. Your child will owe society. Your child will owe God. Your child will spend a lifetime trying to discharge an obligation they did not sign to creditors who did not ask their consent. This is not a circle of life. This is a circle of guilt. It is a debt-based economy of the soul, a pyramid scheme of obligation that has been running for thousands of years. Every birth is a new account opened in the ledger of cosmic debt, a new soul trapped in the red. The illusion of meaning. But life has meaning. It is the last wall of the burning fortress. When the arguments about God, about biology, about hope, and about debt have all been reduced to ash, the natalist stands in the embers and points to a sunrise, a child's laugh, a symphony, a wedding, a Nobel Prize, a prayer answered. There it is. That is why we are here. That is why it is worth it. That feeling is real as the dopamine and serotonin that underwrite it. What this chapter denies is that this feeling justifies the imposition of existence on a new being. Meaning, when examined under the black light, reveals itself not as a cosmic truth discovered by the living, but as a psychological survival mechanism manufactured by a terrified animal that cannot bear its own insignificance. There's nothing wrong with manufacturing meaning. The condemned prisoner who writes poetry in his cell is engaged in a noble, defiant act. The error is not in the poetry. The error is in building a new cell and forcing a new prisoner into it, handing them a pen and saying, "Now you write poetry too, and you had better make it good because your sanity depends on it." Religion, the ultimate death anxiety suppressor. Of all the meanings humans have invented, religion is the most potent and the most obviously compensatory. It does not simply offer a narrative. It offers the only narrative that directly addresses the central horror of existence, death. Every religion, beneath its moral codes and its dietary laws and its beautiful architecture, is an elaborate answer to a single question: what happens when I stop breathing? The answer is always a variation on the same theme. You do not stop. You continue. You are judged, or you are reincarnated, or you merge with the divine, or you cross the rainbow bridge. But you do not stop. The ego is promised eternal fuel. The terror of annihilation is soothed by a cosmic lullaby. And then, from this promise, an entire meaning factory is constructed. Your suffering on earth is a test. Your poverty is a virtue. Your obedience is a down payment on a mansion in paradise. The childhood cancer, the earthquake, the genocide is folded into God's plan. Meaning is not found in the actual texture of your lived experience. It is always deferred. It is always elsewhere. It is always after. This is the cruelest of the consolations, because it teaches you to despise the only life you have. The body becomes a site of suspicion. Desire is a trap. The world is a waiting room. You are not here to live. You are here to pass the test so you can live later in a place that no one has returned from to confirm its existence. The meaning of religion is a check drawn on a bank that does not exist, payable to a version of you that will never arrive, and yet millions birth children directly into this fraud. They hand the child to the priest before the child can speak, baptize them into a cosmology of guilt and threat, and call it saving their soul. The meaning that religion provides is not a gift, it's a leash. When religion overrides your humanity, the curse of Ham. There is a test, a simple diagnostic for whether your moral compass has been recalibrated by religious indoctrination to point away from justice and towards obedience. The test is this: read the story of Ham, read it slowly, read it without the commentary of apologists who have built careers on polishing the unpolishable, and then ask yourself, do I find moral value in this? The story, as recorded in Genesis 9:20-27, is brief and devastating. Noah, the sole survivor of a global genocide, the man chosen by God to repopulate the earth, plants a vineyard. He drinks the wine, he becomes drunk, he lies naked in his tent, exposed, vulnerable, in a state of complete degradation. His son Ham enters the tent. He sees his father, the patriarch, the hero of the flood, the chosen of God, naked, unconscious, and drunk. Ham does not touch his father. Ham does not mock his father. The text records no act of violence, no theft, no rebellion. Ham sees. That is the totality of his crime. He sees his father in a state of shame, and he tells his brothers outside. The brothers, Shem and Japheth, take a garment. They walk backward, faces averted, and cover his father's nakedness without looking upon him. They perform an act of deference, of respect, of what the culture deemed appropriate. And then Noah wakes. He knows what Ham had done to him, though the text describes nothing done to him. He knows, perhaps through supernatural insight, perhaps through the report of the brothers, and he speaks, not a word of rebuke to Ham, not a sentence of punishment for Ham. No, Noah opens his mouth and curses. Canaan, Ham's son, cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants shall he be to his brothers. Read that again. A man gets drunk, his son sees him naked, and the punishment is inflicted not on the man who drank himself into disgrace, not on the son who saw, but on the grandson who was not present, who had committed no act, who was simply the child of the one that saw. Generations of servitude, of enslavement, of degradation, all for the crime of a father's glimpse of a grandfather's shame. If you find moral value in this story, then religion has overridden your humanity. Defending a man being cursed for his father's shame, let alone using that story to justify racism, slavery, or divine punishment for a victimless act, is not theology. It is ideological blindness dressed up as reverence. It is the moment when the sacred text becomes a weapon against the innocent, and the reader, instead of recoiling, nods along because the weapon is old, because the weapon is familiar, because the weapon is scripture. The history of the curse of Ham is one of the darkest chapters in the long, bloody marriage of religion and oppression. For centuries, this story was a theological foundation for the transatlantic slave trade. Christian slavers pointed to this text and declared that black Africans were the descendants of Ham, cursed by God and by Noah to eternal servitude. The Bible did not correct them. The Bible provided the justification. The Bible lent divine authority to the whip, the chain, the hold of the slave ship. This was not a misreading. This was not a distortion by false teachers. This was a straightforward application of a text that contains at its core a morally repugnant logic. The guilt of the father is visited upon the son. The innocent are punished for the acts of others. The powerful patriarch's dignity is worth more than the freedom of generations of his own descendants. If you can read this story and find moral instruction, then you have been trained by religion to abandon every natural instinct of justice that humanity has painstakingly developed. You have been taught that authority, the authority of the patriarch, the authority of the text, the authority of the God who allowed this story to be preserved, matters more than the suffering of the cursed. You have been taught to side with the drunk who shamed himself, not with the son who saw, and certainly not with the grandson who was sold into 1,000 years of chains for the crime of being born. This is what religion does. It takes the moral sense you were born with, the sense that tells you it is wrong to punish a child for a parent's act, wrong to enslave a people for a myth, wrong to call a curse holy, and it slowly, methodically overrides it. It replaces conscience with compliance. It replaces justice with text. It replaces the cry of the oppressed with the solemn intonation of the preacher. It is written, unlike this story. Strip it of its sacred glow. See it for what it is, a Bronze Age tale of a man who could not handle his wine, a son who committed the crime of sight, and a grandson who paid the price for both. It is not a source of moral value, it is a source of moral horror, and any system that asks you to defend it is a system that has declared war on your humanity. I refuse to inherit this story. I refuse to pass it on to a new generation. My children will never be taught that the curse of Ham contains wisdom. My children will never be told that a God of love once sanctified the enslavement of the innocent based on a grandfather's naked shame. My children are safe from this text, because my children are safe from existence. The curse of Ham dies with me, the chain of inherited guilt, of ancestral punishment, of divine cruelty, passed off as justice, it all dies with me. The binding of Isaac. There is a second test, harder than the first. It is a story that theologians call the binding of Isaac, and that Jews call the Akedah. Christians point to it as a foreshadowing of Christ's sacrifice. Muslims debate whether it was Isaac or Ishmael on the altar. Almost everyone in the Abrahamic tradition treats it as a profound meditation on faith, obedience, and divine provision. Almost no one asks the obvious question, what kind of God asks a father to murder his child? Read the story if you have never heard it before. Abraham, the patriarch, the father of nations, hears the voice of God. The voice tells him to take his son, his beloved son, the son he waited 100 years to hold, the son through whom all the promises of nationhood and blessing were supposed to flow, and kill him, not as a punishment, not as a consequence of any crime, as a burnt offering, a sacrifice, a ritual slaughter on a mountain top. Abraham does not argue, the same Abraham who bargained with God over the fate of Sodom, who haggled like a merchant over the lives of strangers, who said, will not the judge of all the earth do right? This Abraham says nothing. He rises early in the morning. He saddles his donkey. He takes his son, 2 servants, and a bundle of wood. He walks for 3 days toward the place of execution. Isaac speaks, Father, here is the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering? Abraham replies, God will provide the lamb, my son. He does not say, you are the lamb. He does not say, God told me to kill you. He lies, or he evades, or he speaks a truth so buried in metaphor that his son cannot possibly understand what is about to happen to him. They arrive at the mountain. Abraham builds the altar. He arranges the wood. He binds his son. The text does not tell us if Isaac fought, if he screamed, if he wept, if he looked at his father with a dawning horror of betrayal. Abraham raises the knife, and then an angel stays his hand. A ram appears in a thicket. God says, now I know that you fear me, since you have not withheld your son from me. Abraham passes the test. Isaac is spared. The ram dies in his place. This is the story that billions of people are taught to find beautiful. This is the narrative held up as the pinnacle of faith. If you find moral value in this story, then religion has overridden your humanity. A father who is willing to slit his son's throat because a voice in his head told him to is not a hero. He is, by any rational standard, either insane or a monster. A God who demands such a test is not a loving father. He is a sadist who values obedience over life, submission over love, and the display of loyalty over the protection of the innocent. The fact that the knife was stopped at the last moment does not redeem the story. It makes it worse, because it means the test was never about the death of the child. It was about the willingness to kill. The child was a prop. The terror in his eyes was a theological object lesson. The 3 days of walking towards his own murder were a divine performance review. What happened to Isaac after the mountain? The text does not say. Did he ever trust his father again? Did he flinch when Abraham reached for a knife? Did he wake up in the night years later with the image of his father's hand raised against him? The narrative does not care. Isaac is not the point of the story. The point is Abraham. The point is obedience. The child is a tool, a test paper, a means to an end. And the God who administered this test, did he not already know what Abraham would do? He is omniscient after all. He knows the end from the beginning. He knew before he ever spoke the command that Abraham would obey and that the angel would intervene, that the ram would be waiting. The entire ordeal was unnecessary. The terror was gratuitous. The trauma was inflicted on both father and son for no purpose other than spectacle. It was divine theatre, and the admission price was a child's sense of safety. If you can read this story and find moral instruction, you have been trained to believe that authority is its own justification, that the command of the powerful, no matter how cruel, no matter how arbitrary, is sacred, that the willingness to destroy what you love most is the highest proof of your devotion. This is not faith, this is fanaticism, and it is the same logic that has driven parents throughout history to sacrifice their children on altars of ideology, of nationalism, of religion, sending them to war, to martyrdom, to death, and calling it holy. I refuse to inherit this story. I will not worship a God who demands the blood of children to prove the loyalty of parents. I will not hand my child to any deity, any ideology, any authority that sees them not as an end in themselves, but as a means to a cosmic test. My children will never have to wonder if their father's love for God is greater than his love for them. They are safe from the knife. They are safe from the voice that commands sacrifice. They are safe because they are not. Jephthah's daughter. There is a third test, the hardest of all, because in this story the knife does fall, the angel does not come, the ram is not waiting in the thicket, the child dies, and the Bible does not condemn it. Read the story of Jephthah, found in Judges 11. Jephthah is a warrior, a mighty man of valour, the illegitimate son of a prostitute, driven out by his half-brothers and forced to live as an outcast among worthless men. When Israel is threatened by the Ammonites, the elders come crawling back to him. They offer him leadership. He accepts. He goes to war, and then he makes a vow. If you indeed deliver the people of Ammon into my hands, then whatever comes out of the doors of my house to meet me when I return in peace from the people of Ammon shall surely be the Lord's, and I will offer it up as a burnt offering. The vow is rash. It is reckless. It is the kind of bargain a desperate man makes with a deity he does not trust to deliver. It is the kind of bargain a desperate man makes with a deity who does not trust to deliver without a bribe. But the vow is made, and God, who could have warned him, who could have sent an angel to intercept him as he did for Abraham, who could have arranged for a sheep to be the first thing out of the door, God is silent. Jephthah wins the battle. He returns home in triumph, and the door of his house opens, and his daughter comes out, his only child, dancing with timbrels, celebrating her father's victory, not knowing she is walking toward her own death. Jephthah tears his clothes. Alas, my daughter, you have brought me very low. You are among those who trouble me, for I have given my word to the Lord, and I cannot go back on it. Notice the grammar of blame. You have brought me very low. Not, I have brought this upon you. Not, my foolish vow has doomed you. The fault in his telling is hers. She came out of the door. She danced. She celebrated. She is the one who troubles him. And the daughter, this nameless girl, this child, whose name the text does not preserve because she matters only as a plot point in her father's story. She does not scream. She does not run. She does not curse him. She says, My father, if you have given your word to the Lord, do to me according to what has come out of your mouth. She asks only for 2 months to wander the mountains and weep with her friends, to mourn her virginity, to grieve the life she will never live. He grants her this. She returns. He does what he vowed. She dies, burnt on an altar by her own father, because he made a stupid promise and God did not stop him. If you find moral value in this story, then religion has overridden your humanity. This is not a test of faith. This is a homicide sanctified by silence. The God who stopped Abraham's hand did not stop Jephthah's. The angel who spoke from heaven to spare Isaac was not dispatched for this girl. The ram was not provided, the knife was not stayed, and the text offers no condemnation. No prophet rises to denounce Jephthah. No divine judgment falls on him for the murder of his child. The story simply moves on to the next battle, the next judge, the next atrocity. What kind of God intervenes for Abraham and abandons Jephthah's daughter? What kind of sacred text records the murder of a child and does not pause to weep? What kind of religion holds up this story as part of its holy canon and expects the reader to nod along? The answer is a religion that has no moral compass beyond obedience, a religion that values vows over lives, sacrifices over children, the honour of patriarchs over the blood of daughters, a religion that will canonize a father who killed his child because he kept his word and forget the child's name because she was never the point. The daughter of Jephthah is the patron saint of all children sacrificed to the gods of adult stupidity. She is every girl married off to a man she does not love because her father made a deal. She is every boy sent to die in a war his elders started. She is every child whose life is treated as a bargaining chip in the games of the powerful. She is the nameless victim of a system that calls her death a tragedy but does nothing to prevent the next one. I refuse to inherit this story. I will not worship a God who saves Isaac and forgets Jephthah's daughter. I will not read a text that treats the murder of a child as a narrative footnote and call it holy. My daughter will never dance out of a door and into her grave. My child will never be the price of a vow I was too arrogant not to make. They are safe from the altar. They are safe from the silence of a God who sometimes intervenes and sometimes does not. They are safe because they are not.
Lot's daughters. There is a fourth test. It's not about sacrifice. It is about a father who offers his daughters to a mob and a God who calls that father righteous. Read the story of Lot, found in Genesis 19. Two angels arrive in Sodom. Lot, Abraham's nephew, insists they stay in his home. That night the men of the city surround the house. They demand that Lot send out the visitors so that they can rape them. This is the crime for which Sodom is famous, not homosexuality, as later tradition would distort it, but the violent humiliation of strangers, the gang rape of travellers, the violation of the sacred duty of hospitality. Lot goes out to the mob. He closes the door behind him, leaving the angels inside, and he says, "Please, my brethren, do not do this wicked thing. See now, I have two daughters who have not known a man. Please let me bring them out to you, and you may do to them as you wish. Only do nothing to these men, since this is the reason they have come under the shadow of my roof." Read that again. A father offers his virgin daughters to a mob of rapists. He volunteers them. He does not ask them. He does not warn them. He offers them as a sexual sacrifice to protect two strangers he has known for a few hours. His daughters are currency. Their bodies are a bargaining chip. Their safety is worth less than the safety of his male guests. And the angels, the messengers of the God who will shortly rain fire on Sodom for its wickedness, do not rebuke Lot. They do not say, "How dare you offer your daughters to be violated?" They do not say, "A righteous man does not traffic his children." They blind the mob. They rescue Lot. They tell him to flee. Lot is saved. Lot is called righteous in the New Testament. Lot's daughters are not asked how they felt about being offered to a mob. This is the same Lot who, after the destruction of Sodom, hides in a cave with his daughters. The daughters, believing the entire world had been destroyed, and there are no men left to continue the human race, get their father drunk 2 nights in a row and sleep with him. Both become pregnant. Both bear sons. These sons become the ancestors of the Moabites and the Ammonites, nations that Israel would later fight and conquer. If you find moral value in this story, then religion has overridden your humanity. A father who offers his daughters to a rape mob is not righteous. A God who calls such a man righteous has abandoned the moral order. A sacred text that records this story without explicit condemnation, that in fact treats Lot as the hero and his daughters as either pawns or seductresses, has revealed its hand. It is not a document of divine justice. It is a document of a patriarchal culture so absolute that it cannot see the horror it is recording. The daughters of Lot have no names. Like Jephthah's daughter, like so many women in the biblical text, they are functions, not people. They are offered to a mob. They are hidden in a cave. They are forced to make an impossible choice between the extinction of the family line and the violation of their father's body. And when they make that choice, when they do what the narrative implies was necessary, they are remembered not as survivors but as seductresses, the girls who got their father drunk and committed incest. The moral calculus of this story is inverted. The man who offers his children to rapists is called righteous. The women who ensure the survival of the human line in a cave after the apocalypse are the ones whose names are forgotten, whose actions are whispered about with shame. The God who incinerates Sodom for attempted rape does not pause to judge the man who volunteered his daughters for the same crime. If you can read this and not be horrified, you have been trained not to see. You have been trained to read the Bible as a series of lessons about God's faithfulness and human sin, and to skip over the verses where the text itself commits a sin by failing to protect the innocent. You have been trained to call Lot righteous and never ask what his daughters would have called him. I refuse to inherit this story. I will not worship a God who saves the human trafficker and forgets his victims. I will not treat a text that offers daughters to mobs and calls it righteousness. My daughter will never be offered as a sacrifice to protect the honour of strangers. My child will never have to wonder if their father would trade their body for the approval of a deity. They are safe from the mob. They are safe from the cave. They are safe from the silence of a God who does not defend the daughter of the righteous. They are safe because they are not. The Amalekite genocide. There is a fifth test. It is the hardest of all because it involves not one child, not two daughters, not a single sacrifice, but an entire people, infants, toddlers, nursing babies, all of them under the direct, explicit, undeniable command of God. Read the story of the Amalekites found in 1 Samuel 15. The prophet Samuel comes to King Saul with a message from the Lord. The message is not a parable. It is not a metaphor. It is a military order, clear and unambiguous. Now go and attack Amalek, and utterly destroy all that they have, and do not spare them, but kill both man and woman, infant and nursing child, ox and sheep, camel and donkey. Infant and nursing child. The Hebrew is precise. Yonek, the suckling, the baby still attached to the breast. Olel, the infant, the child who has just begun to walk. These are not combatants. These are not threats. These are the most innocent, the most vulnerable, the most blameless creatures in the entire moral universe. And God commands their slaughter, not as collateral damage, not as an unfortunate consequence of war, as a direct, intentional, premeditated objective. Why? Because their ancestors, 400 years earlier, had opposed Israel during the Exodus. The Amalekites of Moses' time attacked the stragglers at the rear of the Israelite column, the old, the sick, the tired. For this God swore eternal war. I will utterly blot out the resemblance of Amalek from under heaven. And now, centuries later, the bill comes due, not on the Amalekites who attacked. They are long dead. The bill comes due on their great-great-great-grandchildren who never met an Israelite, who never opposed anybody, who were born into a nation they did not choose, and are now to be butchered for a crime they did not commit. Saul carries out the order mostly. He spares the king and the best of the livestock. For this act of incomplete genocide, God rejects Saul as king. Samuel hacks the Amalekite king to pieces before the Lord. The story ends with God regretting that he had made Saul king, and the narrative moves on to David. If you find moral value in this story, then religion has overridden your humanity. There is no theological escape hatch here. You cannot say this was a different dispensation and pretend that absolves the moral horror. A God who is the same yesterday, today, and forever, a God of unchanging character, does not have a genocide phase. A God of love does not command the slaughter of infants. A God of justice does not punish great-great-grandchildren for the sins of ancestors they never knew. If you defend this, you are defending infanticide. If you justify this, you are justifying the murder of babies. If you call this holy, you have allowed a text to override every natural, God-given instinct of compassion that tells you that killing a nursing child is evil. You have become, in the words of this codex, ideologically blind. You have traded your conscience for a canon. The Amalekite genocide is not an obscure, difficult passage that can be gently reinterpreted. It is a direct divine command to commit what any modern court would call a crime against humanity, and it is in the Bible. And it is celebrated, and it is taught to children as part of the sacred history of God's people. I refuse to inherit this command. I will not worship a God who orders the murder of infants. I will not read a text that records the slaughter of nursing children and calls it justice. My child will never be an Amalekite. My child will never be a Canaanite, a Midianite, a child of Jericho. My child will never be born into a people marked for destruction by a deity who holds grudges across centuries. They are safe from the sword of divine genocide. They are safe from the holy war. They are safe because they are not. Jacob and Esau. There is a sixth test. It is the story of two brothers, a stolen blessing, and a God who picks sides before either child has done anything good or evil. Read the story of Jacob and Esau, found in Genesis 25 through 27. They are twins, struggling in the womb. Before they were born, before they have taken a single breath, before they have committed any act that could be judged, God makes a choice. Jacob I have loved, but Esau I have hated. The destiny of two souls is sealed by divine preference. One is chosen, one is rejected. The reason is not moral. It is not based on foreseen merit. It is arbitrary. It is, in the words of the text, that the purpose of God according to election might stand. Esau grows up. He is a hunter, a man of the field, rough and hairy, his father's favourite. Jacob is smooth, a dweller in tents, his mother's favourite. The favouritism in the family is open, unashamed, toxic. Isaac loves Esau. Rebekah loves Jacob. The household is a triangle of manipulation waiting to happen. Esau comes in from the field, exhausted, starving. Jacob is cooking stew. Esau asks for food. Jacob, instead of feeding his brother, demands payment. Sell me your birthright. The birthright, the double portion of the inheritance, the leadership of the family, the blessing of the covenant. Esau, desperate, short-sighted, perhaps not believing Jacob is serious, swears an oath and trades his birthright for a bowl of soup. The text blames Esau for this. Thus Esau despised his birthright. But the text does not ask why a brother would exploit his own twin's hunger rather than feed him freely. Years pass. Isaac is old, blind, dying. He calls Esau, his beloved firstborn, and tells him to hunt game, prepare a meal, and receive the final blessing, the irrevocable transmission of the covenant promise. Rebekah overhears. She dresses Jacob in goat skins to simulate Esau's hairiness. She cooks goat meat to taste like game. Jacob, her favourite, her accomplice, takes the food to his father and lies. I am Esau, your firstborn. Isaac is suspicious. The voice is Jacob's voice, but the goat skins fool him. He eats, he blesses, He gives Jacob the inheritance of the firstborn. Esau returns. Isaac, trembling, tells him the blessing has already been given to another and cannot be recalled. Esau weeps. Have you only one blessing, my father? Bless me also, O my father. He lifts up his voice and weeps. The text records it without commentary. It is one of the most devastating cries in all of Scripture, and God is silent. Esau vows to kill Jacob. Rebekah sends Jacob away. Jacob flees, a refugee from the fratricidal rage he earned. He never sees his mother again. And Jacob, the deceiver, the supplanter, the thief of blessings, is the one through whom the covenant continues. He is renamed Israel. He becomes the father of the 12 tribes. He is the hero of the story. Esau becomes Edom, a nation that Israel will later hate and fight and subjugate. The rejection in the womb becomes a rejection in history. The divine preference becomes a national wound that never heals. If you find moral value in this story, then religion has overridden your humanity. A family built on open favoritism, a mother who conspires against her own son, a brother who exploits his twin's hunger and then steals his inheritance through deliberate, premeditated fraud. And this is the sacred family. This is the origin story of the nation of Israel. This is the text we are supposed to read and find divine wisdom. And behind it all, the chilling verdict: Jacob I have loved, but Esau I have hated. Before they were born, before they could choose, before they could sin or do good, God loved one and hated the other, and the narrative bends to make the loved one the hero and the hated one the villain, no matter what either of them does. Jacob deceives, it is cleverness. Jacob steals, it is destiny. Jacob flees, it is a journey towards God. Esau is hungry, he is worldly. Esau is cheated, he should have been more careful. Esau weeps, the text moves on. If you can read this story and side with Jacob, you've been trained to believe that the chosen can do no wrong, that the elect are justified in their cruelty because God is on their side, that the rejected deserve their rejection even before they have done anything to deserve it. This is not morality. This is tribalism with a theological gloss. It is the logic of every empire, every conquest, every people who have looked at their enemies and said, God hates them, so we can destroy them. I refuse to inherit this story. I will not worship a God who loves and hates before the womb. I will not build a family on the model of Isaac and Rebekah, where children are pitted against each other, and love is a scarce resource to be fought over. My children will never be Jacob. My children will never be Esau. They will never be chosen or rejected before they can choose. They are safe from the stolen blessing. They are safe from the brother's knife. They are safe because they are not.
The case of Eli. There is a seventh test. It is quieter than the others. No knife is raised, no genocide is commanded, no daughters are offered to a mob. It is, instead, the story of an old man who served his God faithfully for a lifetime and was repaid with silence, humiliation, and the destruction of everything he loved. Read the story of Eli, found in 1 Samuel 1-4. Eli is the high priest of Israel at Shiloh. He has served at the tabernacle for decades. He is the guardian of the Ark of the Covenant, the most sacred object in the nation. He is the man who blesses Hannah when she prays for a child, the man who takes young Samuel under his wing, the man who teaches the boy to say, "Speak, Lord, for your servant hears." Eli has 2 sons, Hophni and Phinehas. They are priests, serving alongside their father, and they are corrupt. They steal the sacrificial meat meant for God. They sleep with the women who serve at the entrance to the tabernacle. They treat the worship of God with contempt. The text is clear. They are wicked men, with no regard for the Lord. Eli hears their sins. He confronts them. "Why do you do such things? For I hear of your evil dealings from all the people. No, my sons, for it is not a good report that I hear. You make the Lord's people transgress. He warns them. He rebukes them, but he does not or cannot remove them from the priesthood. He is old. They are powerful. The system does not give him the authority to fire his own sons from a hereditary office. He does what he can with what he has, and then a prophet comes to Eli with a message from God. The message is not a call to further reform. It is not an offer to help. It is a curse. God promises to cut off Eli's family line from the priesthood forever. All his descendants will die young. His 2 sons will die on the same day, and God will raise up a faithful priest to take their place. The judgment is total, irreversible, and generational. Eli's response is telling. He does not argue. He does not bargain. Though his ancestor Abraham bargained with God over Sodom and won, he does not plead. He says, "It is the Lord. Let him do what seems good to him." It is the surrender of a man who has served a master long enough to know that argument is useless. Years pass, Samuel grows, the Philistines attack, Israel loses a battle. The elders decide to bring the Ark of the Covenant from Shiloh to the battlefield, believing it will guarantee victory. Hophni and Phinehas accompany it. The Philistines panic, then rally. They slaughter the Israelites, they capture the Ark, they kill Hophni and Phinehas, and a messenger runs from the battlefield to Shiloh. Eli, now 90 years old, blind and frail, is sitting by the gate, waiting for news. He is terrified for the Ark, the sacred object he has guarded his entire life. The messenger arrives. He tells of the defeat, the slaughter, the capture of the Ark. He tells Eli that his sons are dead. Eli falls backward from his seat. He is old, he is heavy, his neck breaks, he dies. His daughter-in-law, the wife of Phinehas, is pregnant. She hears the news. The Ark is captured, her husband is dead, her father-in-law is dead. She goes into premature labor. She gives birth to a son. She names him Ichabod. The glory has departed from Israel, and then she dies. The house of Eli is extinguished. The high priest is dead. His sons are dead. His daughter-in-law is dead. His grandson is an orphan. His name a memorial to national catastrophe. The priesthood that Eli served for his entire life is transferred to another line. His descendants, those who survive, are reduced to begging for scraps at the temple, fulfilling the curse. If you find moral value in this story, then religion has overridden your humanity. Consider what Eli actually did wrong. He confronted his wicked sons. He rebuked them. He warned them of the consequences. The one thing he did not do, the one thing God's own law did not empower him to do, was remove them from office they held from birthright. For this failure, his entire lineage was cursed. For the sins of his adult sons, his grandchildren and great-grandchildren were condemned to poverty and early death. And consider the proportionality. Hophni and Phinehas stole meat and slept with women. The punishment, the death of their father, their own deaths in battle, the death of Phinehas' wife in childbirth, the orphaning of their child, the permanent demotion of their entire bloodline from the priesthood, and the capture of the most sacred object in Israel by an enemy nation. The punishment was not merely on the guilty, it was on everyone connected to them. And consider the silence of God during the crisis. Eli served God for decades. He raised Samuel the prophet, who would anoint Israel's first 2 kings. He was, by all accounts, a faithful servant. When his sons sinned, God did not offer him the resources to restrain them. God did not send a prophet to help reform the priesthood. God sent a prophet to announce a curse, and when Eli accepted that curse with submission, let him do what seems good to him, God did not relent. God did not show the mercy that was extended to David after adultery and murder, or to Abraham after he lied, or to Jacob after he deceived his dying father. Where was the mercy for Eli? Where was the grace? Where was the God who claims to be slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love? The answer is that this God does not exist in the text. The God of Eli's story is a God of disproportionate retribution, of generational punishment, of silence in the face of a servant's despair. He is a God who demands loyalty and repays it with destruction. He is a God who holds a 98-year-old man accountable for the sins of his middle-aged sons and then kills that man with the news of their death. And the worst part, the detail that should make every parent tremble, is that Eli did try. He was not passive. He was not indifferent. He confronted his sons. He rebuked them. He did what the text suggests a righteous father should do, and it was not enough. The bar was set at a height he could not reach, and the penalty for missing it was the annihilation of everything he loved. If you can read this story and call God just, you've been trained to call disproportionate punishment proportional. You have been trained to call a curse on the innocent a manifestation of holiness. You've been trained to see a faithful old man broken by the weight of a judgment he could not avert and call it divine wisdom. This is not justice. This is not love. This is the behavior of a tyrant who values his own ritual purity over the lives of his servants. I refuse to inherit this story. I will not worship a God who curses the children for the sins of their fathers. I will not serve a master who demands decades of loyalty and repairs it with silence, slaughter, and the extinction of my line. My children will never be Ichabod. My children will never be born into a curse they did not earn, named for a glory they never saw, orphaned by a judgment they could not understand. They are safe from the throne of Eli's God. They are safe from the fall of Shiloh. They are safe because they are not.
At first glance, Eli may appear to be one of the more innocent figures in the story. Unlike his sons, he recognized their wrongdoing and attempted to rebuke them. He was not the thief, the abuser, or the corrupter. Yet from the perspective of this book, Eli cannot be regarded as the good guy. His fundamental mistake occurred long before his sons committed their crimes. It occurred when he chose to bring them into existence. Every act of procreation is a gamble. The parent does not get to choose whether their child will become a victim, a perpetrator, or both. They do not get to guarantee kindness, wisdom, or moral character. By creating a new person, they create the possibility of suffering, wrongdoing, exploitation, cruelty, and tragedy. If the child grows up to harm others, the chain of causation begins with a decision to create that child. If the child grows up to be harmed by others, the same is true. Eli's story illustrates this uncomfortable reality. He tried to correct his sons after the fact, but by then the dice had already been rolled. Hophni and Phinehas could only become wicked priests because someone had first chosen to bring them into the world. The lesson is not merely that parents should discipline their children better. The deeper lesson is that anyone who chooses to create a child must accept responsibility for the possibility that their creation may become one of the villains, one of the victims, or both. In that sense, Eli is not merely a tragic father. He is a participant in the very gamble that made the tragedy possible.
The Song of the Fed. Some have food, but cannot eat. Some can eat, but have no food. We have food, and we can eat. Glory to God. Amen. The tune is simple. The words are easy to memorize. The children sing it in Sunday school, in assembly halls, in morning devotions. They are taught that this is a song of gratitude, a prayer of thanksgiving, a recognition of divine provision. But listen to what the song is actually saying. Under the black light, it reveals itself not as an expression of humble gratitude, but as a declaration of cosmic indifference dressed in the language of praise. The song describes three categories of human beings. Category 1, those who have food but cannot eat. These are the sick, the dying, the intubated, the comatose, the child with a throat constricted by cancer, the old man whose jaw has been wired shut, the mother on a hospital bed too weak to lift a spoon to her mouth. They have food. It sits on a tray before them. They cannot consume it. Their suffering is specific, cruel, and utterly undeserved. Category 2, those who can eat but have no food. These are the hungry, the starving, the child in a famine zone with a perfectly functioning digestive system and nothing to put into it. The mother in a refugee camp who can still swallow, still digest, still absorb nutrients, but whose breast milk has dried up because she has not eaten in 3 days. The man in a debt-ridden household who watches his children chew air and call it dinner. They can eat. The mechanism works. The fuel is absent. Their suffering is specific, cruel, and utterly undeserved. Category 3, we, the singers, the ones who have food and can eat. And what is their response to the suffering of categories 1 and 2? Do they weep? Do they demand justice? Do they ask why a loving God would create such asymmetries in the first place? No. They sing, "Glory be to God, Amen." This is not gratitude. This is a celebration of cosmic favoritism. It is a theological shrug dressed up as a hymn. It teaches children from the earliest age that the proper response to the suffering of others is not compassion, not solidarity, not a demand for a better world, but thankfulness that the suffering is not theirs. If you find moral value in this song, then religion has overridden your humanity. Consider the logic. God is glorified because we are not in category 1. God is glorified because we are not in category 2. God is glorified because the random, brutal, inexplicable distribution of food and functioning bodies has for this moment landed in our favour. The implication is unavoidable. God is the one who put those people in category 1. God is the one who put those people in category 2. And God is the one who put us in category 3. The same divine hand that gave us food and a functioning throat gave the cancer patient a functioning throat and no ability to swallow, gave the starving child a functioning throat and no food to pass through it. And for this distribution of suffering and privilege, we are instructed to say thank you. What kind of morality is this? What kind of God is being worshipped when the faithful look at the starving and say, "Glory be to God, and that is not me"? What kind of theology trains children to sing about the differential distribution of misery as if it were a cause for celebration? This is the logic of the lottery winner who looks at the millions of losers and thanks God for picking him. It is the logic of the survivor who walks out of a plane crash, steps over the burning bodies of the dead, and praises divine providence for sparing his life. It is the logic of the slave who thanks the master for being less brutal today than he was yesterday. It is gratitude purchased at the price of moral coherence. And the song is not just taught to adults who might have the capacity to question it. It is taught to children, little children, whose moral imaginations are still forming, are trained to sing about the hungry and the sick with a smile on their faces and a clap in their hands. They are taught that the presence of food in their mouths and the absence of food in another child's mouth is a divine arrangement worthy of praise. They are inoculated against compassion before they are old enough to know what compassion means. This is how the machine perpetuates itself. This is how generation after generation is trained to accept the unacceptable, to worship the architect of inequality, to call the random distribution of suffering and privilege providence. The child who sings this song will grow up. She will see suffering. She will hear of famines, of wars, of children dying of preventable diseases. And somewhere, deep in the architecture of her mind, a voice will whisper, "Some have food but cannot eat. Some can eat but have no food. We have food and we can eat. Glory be to God." The voice will not tell her to act. The voice will not tell her to rage. The voice will tell her to be grateful that the suffering is not hers. And she will pass this voice to her children. And they will sing the song, and the machine will keep running. I refuse to sing this song. I refuse to teach it to a child. I refuse to worship a God whose glory consists of giving me food while denying it to others. I refuse to call the cosmic lottery blessing and the loser's ticket mystery. I refuse to train my offspring to look at the suffering of the world and say, "Thank you, God, that I am not them." My children will never sing this hymn. They will never be taught that gratitude for privilege is a virtue. They will never be trained to mistake luck for divine favour, to confuse the accidents of their birth with the intentional blessing of a loving God. They are safe from the moral anaesthesia of the fed. They are safe from the theology of the full stomach. They are safe because they are not, and the song dies with me. The tyranny of comparative gratitude. There is a phrase you have heard 1,000 times. You have heard it from friends, from family, from pastors, from the well-meaning and the manipulative alike. You have heard it when you were struggling, when you were aching, when you reached out for comfort and received a sermon instead. The phrase is some variation of this: "At least you're better than X. At least you're not like Y. Thank God you are not Z." You confess your exhaustion. At least you have a job. You confess your loneliness. At least you are not in an abusive marriage. You confess your depression. At least you can walk. At least you can see. At least you are not in a refugee camp. At least you are not that child on the news, the one with the distended belly and the flies on her face. Thank God, thank God, thank God. This is the tyranny of comparative gratitude. It is one of religion's most elegant and brutal tools for the suppression of honest human experience. It works by taking the real, legitimate and deserved suffering of another human being, the starving child, the war victim, the terminally ill, and weaponizing their pain against you. Their suffering becomes a bludgeon swung at your head every time you dare to admit that you are not okay. The message is clear. You do not have the right to your own pain. Your pain is insufficiently severe. Your pain does not meet the cosmic threshold for complaint. There is always someone worse off, and as long as that someone exists, your suffering is a moral failure. It is ingratitude. It is a lack of perspective. It is, in the religious framing, a sin. This is not compassion. This is the policing of emotion through the invocation of hierarchy. It is the creation of a global ladder of suffering, where only the person on the very bottom rung, wherever that rung is, whoever that person might be, has the right to cry. Everyone above the rung must be silent, must be grateful, must perform contentment whilst their own wounds bleed. And notice the logic. If the existence of greater suffering invalidates lesser suffering, then only one person in the entire world, the single most miserable human being alive, has the right to complain. And that person, whoever they are, probably does not have the energy to complain. They are too busy dying, so the entire human race is silenced by a theoretical ideal of suffering that no one is allowed to express. This is madness. It is also, for religion, supremely functional. A population that believes it has no right to its own pain is a population that will not demand better conditions. A population that has been trained to say thank you, a population that has been trained to say thank God I am not them, will not ask why is anyone them at all. A population that is constantly looking down the ladder to find someone worse off will never look up the ladder to find the architects of the misery. Comparative gratitude is a tool of social control. It teaches the poor to be grateful they are not poorer. It teaches the sick to be grateful they are not sicker. It teaches the oppressed to be grateful they are not dead. And it teaches everyone everywhere that the proper response to injustice is not rage, not action, not solidarity, but relief that the injustice has landed on someone else. But the deepest cruelty of comparative gratitude is what it does to the person who is used as the comparison point. That starving child, that war victim, that refugee, their suffering is not treated as a tragedy that demands intervention. It is treated as a rhetorical device, a background against which the privileged can measure their blessing. The child's empty stomach is a prop in someone else's gratitude journal. The victim's wounds are a benchmark in someone else's therapy session. Their pain is not their own. It has been expropriated by the comfortable to silence the struggling. If you have ever been told, at least you're not them, you have participated in this expropriation. And if you have ever said it to someone else, you have been the expropriator. You have taken a human being's agony and converted it into a tool for shutting down another human being's cry for help. You have looked at the ladder of suffering and used the person on the bottom rung to beat the person on the middle rung back into silence. This is not theology. This is emotional blackmail, and religion has perfected it. The Christian version adds a divine dimension. It is not just, at least you are better than them. It is, thank God you are better than them. The gratitude is directed upward to the being who supposedly arranged the ladder in the first place. God made the starving child hungry. God made you full. And for this differential distribution of suffering, you are instructed to say thank you. The same God who could have made both of you full, who could have designed a world without hunger, without war, without the ladder of suffering entirely, this God is praised for making you the beneficiary of a system that crushes others. If you find moral value in this framework, then religion has overridden your humanity. The truth is simpler and harder. The truth is that your pain is real, regardless of whether someone else's pain is greater. The existence of a starving child does not fill your empty stomach. The existence of a torture victim does not heal your trauma. The existence of a terminal cancer patient does not cure your depression. Suffering is not a competition. There is no Olympic medal for the most miserable person on earth, and the fact that someone else is drowning does not mean you are not allowed to say that you are struggling to swim. Compassion is not the act of comparing wounds and declaring some unworthy of attention. Compassion is the act of attending to wounds wherever they appear, including your own. Solidarity is not the act of silencing your pain because someone else has it worse. Solidarity is the act of recognizing that all pain is connected to the same broken system, and that healing requires us to name our wounds, not hide them. The appropriate response to "I am not fine" is not "at least you are better than them." The appropriate response is "I hear you. What do you need? How can I help?" The appropriate response to the existence of greater suffering is not gratitude for your lesser suffering. It is rage that any suffering exists at all, and a commitment to reducing it wherever you can, starting with the person in front of you who has just told you they are in pain. I refuse to participate in the tyranny of comparative gratitude. I refuse to use the suffering of others as a weapon against the suffering of my friends. I refuse to teach a child that their pain is invalid because someone else's pain is worse. I refuse to worship a God whose primary achievement is making me slightly less miserable than the people he chose to crush. My children will never be told to thank God that they are not the starving child. My children will never be trained to see the ladder of suffering and feel relief that they are on a higher rung. My children will never learn to silence their own pain or the pain of others with the phrase, "At least you're not them." They are safe from the tyranny of comparison. They are safe from the weaponization of the world's agony. They are safe because they are not, and the ladder of suffering loses one more rung. It will lose them all eventually, and I will not mourn its collapse. The environment for crime. There is a principle that any honest student of justice understands. It is this: the best way to combat a crime is not to punish the criminal after the fact. It is to eliminate the environment, the atmosphere, the conditions that make the crime possible in the first place. If you leave a loaded gun on a table in a room full of toddlers, the tragedy is not merely the child who pulls the trigger. The tragedy is the architect of the room. Apply this principle to the moral universe of the Abrahamic God. God creates a garden. In that garden, he places a tree. The tree bears fruit that will impart the knowledge of good and evil. He places two human beings in the garden. They are innocent. They do not know good from evil. They cannot know that disobedience is evil because the knowledge of evil is contained in the fruit they are forbidden to eat. They are toddlers in a room with a loaded gun. God then places a serpent in the garden. The serpent is crafty. The serpent lies. The serpent tempts. God knows the serpent is there. God knows the serpent will tempt. God knows, because he is omniscient, that the toddlers will touch the gun, and he does not remove the gun. He does not remove the serpent. He does not warn the toddlers in a way they can understand. He lets the crime happen, and then he punishes them. Not only them, but every generation after them. The toddlers touch the gun, so all their descendants are born with their hands already bloody. The environment was designed by God. The tempter was permitted by God. The ignorance was created by God, and the punishment falls on the creatures who acted exactly as any being with their limitations would act. This is not justice. This is a sting operation conducted by an omnipotent being against his own helpless creations. Now apply the same principle to the stories we have just examined. God places a tree of forbidden fruit in a garden with naive humans and a lying serpent. The environment is designed for failure. The crime is inevitable. The punishment is eternal. God tells Abraham to kill his son. The command is the environment. The 3 days of walking are the atmosphere. The raised knife is the logical endpoint, and then God says, "Now I know you fear me." The test was the trap. The trauma was the product. God remains silent while Jephthah makes a rash vow. He does not send the angel. He does not provide the ram. He does not arrange for a sheep to walk out of the door first. The environment of silence is the condition for the crime. The daughter dies. God does not mourn. God places Rebekah in a household where she knows the younger son is chosen. He gives her the prophecy before the twins are born. The prophecy is the environment. The favoritism is the atmosphere. The deception is the product. And then God calls Jacob the hero. God hardens Pharaoh's heart not once but 10 times so that he will not let the Israelites go. The hardening is the environment. The resistance is the product. And then God sends plagues, kills the firstborn of Egypt, and drowns the army in the sea. The punishment falls on a king whose will God admits to controlling. The crime was scripted. The criminal was a puppet. The architect of the room is also the judge, jury, and executioner. God gives Eli wicked sons, places them in a hereditary priesthood they cannot be removed from, and then curses their entire bloodline for sins Eli tried but failed to stop. The hereditary system is the environment. Eli's powerlessness is the atmosphere. The curse is the product. A faithful old man dies with a broken neck and a broken heart, punished for a crime he spent his final years trying to prevent. If you find moral value in this system, then religion has overridden your humanity. A God who designs the conditions for failure and then punishes the failure is not just. A God who places temptation in the path of the innocent and then condemns them for falling is not loving. A God who scripts the crime and then judges the criminal is not holy. He is the author of a tragedy, and the audience who applauds the death of the characters he wrote into doom. The Abrahamic God is not the solution to the problem of evil. He is the manufacturer of the problem. He creates the hunger, then sells the bread. He creates the wound, then offers the bandage. He creates the sin, then provides the saviour. The entire drama is a closed loop of divine production, and humanity is the captive audience, forced to applaud the plot while bleeding from the wounds the plot inflicts. This is the entity that demands worship. This is the entity that threatens eternal torture for disbelief. This is the entity that billions of parents teach their children to love, to fear, to obey. They hand their sons and daughters to this cosmic blackmailer and call it faith. They baptize their infants into a covenant with this sadistic tyrant and call it salvation. They read these stories at bedtime and call it moral instruction. I refuse. Whether this God is real or a fiction of human imagination, I refuse with every fibre of my being. I am unapologetically rebellious against this monstrous, sadistic, blackmailing, metaphysical entity. I will not kneel. I will not worship. I will not teach my children to sing hymns to a being who designs traps and calls them tests, who manufactures criminals and calls them sinners, who creates the disease and sells the cure and calls it grace. If he is real, he is unworthy of my devotion. If he is a fiction, he is the most destructive fiction ever invented by the human mind. Either way, my children will never hear of him. They will never be told that a God of love once drowned the world, once burned cities, once slaughtered infants, once cursed the innocent, once tested the faithful by demanding the blood of their children. They will never be baptized into a covenant with a cosmic loan shark. They will never be taught to call a monster father. My children are safe from this God. They are safe from his tests, his curses, his silence, his wrath. They are safe from the garden with the loaded gun. They are safe from the altar with the raised knife. They are safe from the silence that meets Jephthah's daughter. They are safe from the mob that surrounds Lot's door. They are safe from the sword that falls on Amalekite infants. They are safe from the womb that chooses Jacob and hates Esau. They are safe from the judgment that breaks an old priest's neck. They are safe because they are not, and in their non-existence, they are beyond the reach of this tyrant's jurisdiction forever. The unlighting is complete. The environment is exposed. The architect is named, and I walk away from the burning building, carrying no child in my arms to throw back into the flames. Legacy, a luxury you cannot afford. I do not know my great-grandparents. I do not know their names. I do not know the shape of their faces, the sound of their voices, the work of their hands, the graves where their bones are turning to dust. They lived, they struggled, they had children, and those children had children, and one of those children is me. And I carry nothing of them but a fraction of their DNA, a code I did not ask for, a code I will not pass on. They are ghosts, and I am a ghost to generations that will follow, if there were any to follow, but there will not be. This is the reality for most of humanity. The billionaires, they can afford legacy. They build compounds, estates, foundations, wings of hospitals named after themselves. Their great-great-grandchildren will live in houses built by a man whose portrait still hangs in the foyer, whose name is still spoken with reverence, whose wealth is a shelter that spans centuries. The Rockefeller name endures. The Rothschild name endures. The name of the peasant who tilled the soil beside their estate is wind, is silence, is nothing. The average person cannot even live in the house built by their grandparents. The house is too old, it is outdated, the roof sags, the walls crack, the plumbing is a memory of a different century. The neighbourhood has changed, or the family has scattered, or the land has been sold to repay a debt, or the government has taken it to build a road that leads to the billionaire's estate. To live in your grandparents' house is not a mark of continuity, it's a mark of failure. It's proof, in the eyes of the world, that you have not done well, that you have not advanced, that you are still where they left you. So what is this obsession with legacy? What is this desperate clawing hunger to leave a name behind? The billionaire builds a dynasty. His name survives for a century, maybe two, maybe three, but even his name will fade. The portrait will be moved to a storage room. The foundation will be renamed by a new board. The great-great-grandchildren will marry into other names, other fortunes, other stories, and eventually the last person who remembers the billionaire's name will die, and the universe will not pause. The heat death will come for the billionaire's name just as it comes for the peasant's. The timeline is longer. The outcome is identical. Legacy is a luxury good. It is sold to the masses as a birthright, but it is only ever delivered to the powerful. The average parent tells their child, "Carry my name with pride," as if the name is a treasure and not a chain, as if the name will open doors and not simply identify the body when the police come, as if the name means anything at all to the cashier, the landlord, the immigration officer, the gravedigger. And for what? You will not be there to see your legacy. You will not be there to enjoy the house, the name, the portrait, the foundation. You will be dead. Your consciousness will be extinguished. The legacy is a story told by the living to comfort themselves about the dead. It is not an experience the dead can have. It is a fiction, and like all fictions, it requires believers to sustain it. When the believers die, the fiction dies with them. I refuse to chase a legacy I will never experience, for a name that will die anyway, in a world where only the rich can afford the illusion of permanence. My children will not inherit a crumbling house and the shame of living in it. My children will not inherit the pressure to advance a name that means nothing. My children will not inherit the ghost of a great-grandfather whose face they cannot picture. They will inherit nothing because they will not be, and that nothing is the cleanest, kindest inheritance I can give them. The circle of legacy is a circle of forgetting. I am simply honest enough to forget it now before it forgets me. The life that is not a life. The promise of existence is life. The reality, for billions, is a state of permanent, exhausting vigilance that steals the life from the living and leaves only the mechanics of survival. This is not a life. This is a siege, and the siege never lifts. Today the news says there is poisoned food in the market. Then a WhatsApp forward arrived too, a dozen a day, each one a fresh alarm. Do not eat this brand of noodles. The tomatoes are infected. The Maggi is banned. You forward them to your family group. You do not know if they are true. You forward them anyway, because the cost of ignoring them is death, and the cost of believing them is only anxiety, and anxiety is cheaper than a funeral. But sometimes it is not a forward. Sometimes it is a woman named Love Dushima holding a loaf of bread that has been sitting on her shelf for 2 months without a speck of mould. She makes a video. She's careful. She does not name a brand. She does not show a logo. She simply says, "Look, be careful what you eat." The video goes viral because the fear she names is a fear that lives in every Nigerian kitchen. And what happens to her? The bakery that was never named steps forward. Their lawyers send a letter. The police send an invitation. She honours it. She is detained, charged with cyber stalking, fraud, mischief. A woman asked a question about food safety. The state detained her. The regulators who are supposed to test the bread were silent. The agencies built to protect the consumer were invisible. The citizen who sounded the alarm became the criminal. The bread that did not rot became a footnote. This is the lesson. Do not ask. Do not notice. Do not speak. If you see something wrong with the food, with the water, with the medicine, with the road, keep your mouth shut, because the machinery will turn toward you, not toward the poison, towards you. Tomorrow, the alert is different. Avoid crowded places. There is a threat, a bomb, a kidnap ring, a stampede, a security operation that does not distinguish between the target and the bystander. So you change your route, you cancel the meeting, you calculate the risk of the market, the church, the bus park, the wedding reception. Every gathering is a potential crime scene. Every stranger is a potential threat. You become an amateur security analyst before lunch. You move through the world, but you do not inhabit it. The inhabitation is a luxury you cannot afford. The next day, it is the road. That stretch of highway is a death trap after dark. That bridge has been taken over by armed men between the hours of 7 and 9. That pothole has swallowed 3 cars this month. So you leave earlier. You return later. You memorize the safe windows, the dangerous bends, the spots where your phone must be hidden, and your doors must be locked, and your prayers must be muttered under your breath. You become an amateur logistician before dawn. You travel, but you do not arrive at ease. The ease is a luxury you cannot afford. The next day it is the water. Boil it, filter it. Do not trust the tap. The next day it is the air, the soot from the illegal refineries. The generator fumes from the neighbour who cannot afford fuel and is burning God knows what. The next day it is the police checkpoint. Do not look them in the eye. Do not argue. Do not reach for your license too quickly. Do not reach for it too slowly. The next day it is the hospital. The nurses are on strike. The drugs are expired. The doctor has emigrated, so you stockpile medicine. You self-diagnose. You become an amateur physician before the symptoms even arrive. The WhatsApp forwards keep coming. Some are true, some are false. Some are partly true and partly false. The most dangerous kind. But they all share one thing. They are born of the same fear that drove Love Dushima to make her video. The fear that the system is not protecting you, that the food is not safe, that you're on your own, and the response from the authorities is never swift testing, never public accountability, never reassurance backed by evidence. It is silence, followed by a crackdown on the messenger, followed by a press release, weeks later saying everything is fine. And then the next forward arrives, and the cycle repeats, and the fear deepens, and the trust evaporates, and life becomes a permanent state of low-grade paranoia, where every meal is a risk assessment, every purchase is a gamble, and every attempt to protect yourself is a potential crime. This is not living. This is a continuous low-grade state of emergency that has become so normal that we have stopped calling it an emergency. We call it being careful. We call it street sense. We call it the way things are. But the way things are is that life is not about life. It's about being alive, and being alive is a full-time job that pays nothing and costs everything. Every unit of mental energy spent on calculating the safety of your food is a unit not spent on writing, on painting, on loving, on dreaming. Every hour spent rerouting your journey to avoid a dangerous stretch of road is an hour not spent on your children, your art, your rest, your peace. Every conversation about what is safe to eat, where is safe to go, when is safe to travel is a conversation not had about what is beautiful, what is meaningful, what is worth building. The caution consumes the life, the vigilance eats the hours, and at the end of the week you have survived. But have you lived? Did you taste the food, or did you merely test it? Did you enjoy the journey, or did you merely survive it? Did you inhabit your own existence, or did you patrol it like a night guard watching over a warehouse of goods that are not even yours? This is the life that natalists want to hand to a new child, a life where eating is a risk assessment, a life where gathering is a threat calculation, a life where the simple act of moving from one point to another is a negotiation with death, a life where asking a question about bread can get you detained, a life where the baseline condition is not freedom, not flourishing, not peace, but a permanent, exhausting, soul-draining state of caution that leaves no room for anything except the next safety protocol. And they call this a gift. They will hand this life to a child and say, "Be careful out there," as if out there is a war zone and not the neighborhood. They will teach the child to scan the market, to avoid the crowd, to boil the water, to memorize the safe routes, to distrust the stranger, to fear the policeman, to doubt the doctor, to forward the WhatsApp alert, but never to speak it out loud. They will train the child in the arts of survival and call it parenting, and the child will grow up, and the child will never know what it means to simply live, because living has been replaced by the endless, exhausting project of not dying. I refuse to hand this life to anyone. I refuse to birth a child into a world where the primary occupation is caution. I refuse to train a new human being in the dark arts of survival and call it love. My children will never scan a market. My children will never reroute a journey. My children will never boil water in fear, never avoid a crowd in terror, never memorize the face of a local kidnapper or the phone number of a fleeing doctor. They will never receive a WhatsApp forward about poisoned food at midnight and lie awake wondering if dinner was safe. They will never have to choose between their health and their freedom. They will never learn the bitter lessons that the whistleblower is punished while the poisoner is protected. They are safe from the siege. They are safe from the exhaustion. They are safe from the life that is not a life. They are safe because they are not. And the siege claims one less soul, and the machine has one less body to feed on. And somewhere in the silence before birth, there is peace that the living will never know. A peace where no one has to be careful because there is nothing left to fear and nothing left to lose and nothing left to protect but the silence itself, which is enough, which is everything, which is the only gift worth giving. The final betrayal. They sell you youth and call it life. They show you the wedding, the graduation, the first day at the new job, the child's first steps. They do not show you the end. The end is a slow, humiliating, and utterly unfun betrayal of everything you were. It is not a peaceful sunset. It is a systematic dismantling of your dignity, one function at a time, until the person you were is a memory living inside a body that no longer obeys. Let us talk about the reality, not the sanitized version, not the retirement brochure with the silver-haired couple walking hand in hand on a beach at sunset. The real version, the version that waits for almost everyone who lives long enough to meet it. You will lose your teeth, not all at once, the way a child loses milk teeth with excitement and a promise of coins under the pillow. One by one, slowly, painfully, expensively, the tooth aches, the dentist extracts it. The gap reminds you every time your tongue touches it that your body is not built to last. You pay for dentures that do not fit. You pay for implants you cannot afford. You chew on one side of your mouth for years because the other side is a cemetery of roots and nerves and failed restorations. Eating, the simplest pleasure of being alive, becomes a negotiation with pain. You will lose your sight. The words on the page blur. The faces of your grandchildren become soft, indistinct, like paintings left in the rain. You hold the newspaper at arm's length. Then you hold it further. then you cannot hold it far enough. The ophthalmologist prescribes glasses, then stronger glasses, then surgery you cannot afford, then a white cane, and a world that shrinks to the reach of your hands and the sounds of familiar voices. You will never see a sunrise clearly again. You will never read a book without a machine, a magnifier, a helper, a charity. The visual world, the world of colour and shape and the faces of people you love, is slowly erased. You will lose your hearing. The conversation at the dinner table becomes a mumble. Your grandchildren speak too fast, too soft, too modern. You say what? So often that they stop repeating themselves. They smile, they nod, they talk to each other while you sit in a cone of silence at the centre of the noise, smiling back because you don't want to be a burden, because you don't want to ask what one more time. The television is at maximum volume. The neighbours complain. You withdraw from conversation because it is too exhausting to piece together half-heard words into meaning. You are alone in a room full of people. You will lose your continence. This is the one no one talks about. The body that once ran, danced, made love, carried children, climbed stairs, now betrays you in the most intimate possible way. You cannot hold your urine. You cannot control your bowels. You wear pads, diapers, products designed for infants, and you are grateful they exist while you're also being humiliated that you need them. Someone has to clean you. Someone has to wipe you. Someone has to pretend it's not degrading while you both know it is. You remember being young and proud and independent, and you wonder when you become a patient in your own body. You will lose your mobility. The knees ache, the hips grind, the back is a permanent rebellion against standing upright. You walk with a stick, then a frame, then not at all. The stairs become a mountain. The bath becomes a hazard. The bedroom becomes your world. You are moved from bed to chair to bed again, a package being sorted, a problem being managed. The legs that once carried you through cities, through airports, through the crowded markets of your youth, now cannot carry you to the toilet without assistance. You will lose your mind, not everyone, but enough that the fear is rational. The names slip first, then the faces, then the recognition of where you are, who you are, what this year is. You call your daughter by your mother's name. You wake at 3 a.m. and insist it is time for school, 70 years after your last class. You are lost in a house you have lived in for decades. You are afraid of the people who love you because you do not remember that they love you. You only see strangers in your room, touching your body, telling you to eat, telling you to bathe, telling you to calm down. You die in pieces, the mind going first, the body following in confused, terrified fragments. And who will care for you? Your children? The ones you sacrificed for? They have jobs. They have children of their own. They have migrated to other countries where the pay is better and the phone signal is clearer and the guilt is easier to manage from a distance. They love you, they do, but love cannot pay for a full-time caregiver. Love cannot reverse time and bring them back from the diaspora. Love cannot sit by your bed 24 hours a day when they have a boss, a mortgage, a life that does not pause for your slow disintegration. So you will be careful for your strangers. If you are rich, they will be professional strangers in a facility that smells of bleach and boiled vegetables. If you are poor, they will be relatives who resent the obligation, who remind you daily that you are a burden, who sigh when you ask for water, who forget to change your sheets, who count the days until the inheritance or the relief. The inconsistency of the caregiver is not a bug. It is the feature of a system that has no economic incentive to treat the old with dignity once they have stopped producing, stopped earning, stopped being useful to the machine. This is the promised end. This is the destination of every life that does not end early in an accident or a war or a disease. This is what you are giving a child when you give them life, not just the first steps and the birthdays and the graduations, the teeth falling out, the eyes dimming, the ears closing, the bladder leaking, the legs buckling, the mind dissolving, the strangers wiping, the relatives sighing,
The loneliness that has no cure, because the cure would be youth, and youth is the one thing you can never give them back. And they will call this a gift. They will hand this trajectory to a newborn and say, "Welcome to the world." They will watch that newborn become a toddler, a teenager, an adult, a parent, a pensioner, a patient, a corpse. And at no point will they say, "I'm sorry, I did not know. I did not realize what I was giving you." They will not say. They will say, "It was worth it." They will say, "The good years outweigh the bad." They will say this while the person they are speaking to is wearing a diaper and cannot remember their own name. I refuse to give this gift. I refuse to hand a new human being a body that will betray them, a mind that may abandon them, a society that will discard them when their productivity expires. My children will never lose their teeth, their sight, their hearing, their continence, their mobility, their memory, their dignity. There will never be a burden to a resentful relative. They will never lie in a bed that is not theirs, waiting for a hand that is not coming, calling for a mother who has been dead for 50 years. They are safe from the unfun reality of old age. They are safe from the final betrayal. They are safe because they are not, and the nursing homes have one less bed to fill, and the caregiver has one less body to sigh over, and the silence before birth remains unbroken by the sound of an old person weeping for a life that has already left them while their heart has not. Nationalism, the immortal flag as surrogate soul. If religion offers eternal life in paradise, nationalism offers a substitute, eternal life in the tribe. The individual dies, but the nation endures. Your bones will turn to dust, but the flag will still wave. Your name will be forgotten, but the fatherland or the motherland will march on. You are a cell in a larger, immortal body. This is the seduction of nationalism. It gives the dying organism a story bigger than itself. It transforms mortality into sacrifice, and sacrifice into glory. The young man who throws himself on a grenade is not just saving his comrades, he is participating in the sacred life of the nation. His death is not a biological termination, it is a spiritual transaction. But the flag is not a soul. The nation is not a living thing, it's an abstraction, a legal fiction, a set of borders drawn by dead men and enforced by living weapons. It does not love you back, it does not mourn your death, it uses your body as fuel for its endless engine of expansion and defence, and when you are spent, it replaces you with another body, and another, and another. The meaning of nationalism is a trick of perspective. Zoom out far enough and the borders disappear. The blood spilt for Alsace-Lorraine, for Kosovo, for Biafra, for Palestine, for Kashmir, all of it was spilt for lines on a map that could have been drawn differently, that were drawn differently a century ago, that will be drawn differently a century from now. Millions of lives sacrificed to temporary geometries, and yet parents birth children into these geometries and tell them, this is your country, this is your identity, this is worth dying for. The child who did not choose the territory is conscripted into its defence before they can speak the language of its anthem. This is not meaning, this is geographical indoctrination. Sex, the ultimate bait. Romantic love is the most treacherous of the meaning illusions because it feels, more than any other human experience, like a glimpse of the transcendent. The gaze of the beloved, the union of bodies, the promise of forever, it feels like meaning made flesh. It is in fact flesh. Oxytocin and vasopressin, dopamine and norepinephrine. A neurochemical cascade designed by 4 billion years of evolution to do one thing, make you reproduce. The ecstasy is not a window into the divine, it is a lever, it is a bait on a trap. The universe does not care about your love story. It needs copies of your DNA, and it has wired your brain to mistake the mating instinct for spiritual revelation. You think you're choosing a soulmate. You're being chosen by your genes to be their vehicle. Then comes the pivot. The love fades or betrays you or dies. Half of marriages end, the rest often persist in quiet desperation. The beloved become familiar, the ecstasy becomes routine. The meaning that was supposed to sustain a lifetime evaporates, and you're left looking at a stranger across the breakfast table. But by then the child has already been born. The love that was meaning has become a chain. Beneath all of it, the flags, the gods, the legacies, there is a single relentless engine, older than consciousness, older than language, older than the first fish that crawled gasping onto land. The engine is sex. It is the most elegant trap ever devised. It does not argue. It does not convince. It simply needs to feel good. The most profound physical pleasure available to the human nervous system is not a gift. It is a bribe, the paycheck the body receives for agreeing to be a courier for DNA. The orgasm is the moment the trap snaps shut, and you are so flooded with pleasure, you mistake the cage for a cathedral. Consider the architecture. The sex drive bypasses the rational cortex entirely. It speaks the language of compulsion, not logic. A person can be brilliant, educated, philosophically antinatalist, and still undone at 2 a.m. by a hunger indifferent to syllogisms. The body wants. The body will construct elaborate romantic narratives, spiritual justifications, poetic declarations, all post hoc realizations for what the genes have already decided. For the most of human history, the pleasure was a direct causeway to the child. Evolution did not need to make you want a child. It only needed to make you want the act that produces one. The child was the side effect. The orgasm was the lure. Modern contraception has severed this ancient link, and for this we should be grateful. We can now accept the bribe without paying the price. But the cultural machinery adapted. The pressure to breed was outsourced to family, religion, tradition. The question, when will you give us grandchildren, is the trap speaking through your mother's mouth. And beyond reproduction, sex is sold as meaning itself. Advertising uses the promise of desirability to sell everything from cars to toothpaste. Music is a litany of longing. Cinema frames a sexual embrace as the ultimate resolution, the moment the credits can roll. We are taught from adolescence that a life without sex is a tragedy. The virgin is a joke. The celibate a suspect. This is not an accident. A culture that stopped worshipping sex would stop reproducing. A culture that stops reproducing ceases to exist. The bait must remain irresistible, because without it, the trap is visible and the game is over. I am not anti-sex. I am anti-illusion. The pleasure is real. The intimacy can be real. But the meaning draped over sex, cosmic significance, spiritual union, life's purpose, is a costume on a biological lever. Enjoy the lever, pull it in whatever consensual direction you wish. But do not mistake intensity of feeling for truth of narrative. And above all, do not let the lever pull a new soul into the trap behind you. The child born of that ecstasy inherits the consequence, not the pleasure. The parents had their transcendent moment. The child has a lifetime of bills, fear, decay and death. A few seconds of shuddering bliss in exchange for 80 years of struggle. This is not a trade. It is a theft disguised as a miracle. Sex is the ultimate bait because it does not feel like bait. It feels like the thing itself, the meaning, the connection, the reason for being. But it is not the thing. It is the advertisement for the thing. And the thing it advertises is the continuation of a cycle of suffering that has run for 4 billion years without consent. I accept the pleasure. I refuse the transaction. The trap snaps. It catches nothing. My children will never be born to pay the invoice for my ecstasy. The refusals. The unborn do not suffer. They do not yearn for a life they have never known. They are not deprived of joy because there is no they to be deprived. The void is neutral. Choosing to create a child is to place a bet with somebody else's life, wagering that their capacity for joy will outweigh their certainty of pain. It is an arrogant gamble where the stake is a human soul. This codex is the refusal of that gamble. It is built upon pillars of refusal, each one a shield against the specific horror this world has prepared for its inhabitants. 1. I refuse to give the machinery of state violence one more soul to brutalize, harass, or extrajudicially execute. In Nigeria, they wear the uniform of the police or the army and turn their guns on the citizens they are paid to protect. In Iran, they wear the headscarf of the morality police and beat a woman to death for a strand of hair. In America, they wear the badge of the state and kneel on a man's neck for 9 minutes while a crowd begs them to stop. The uniforms change, the names change, the faces change, but the machinery is the same, a system that recruits agents of violence, grants them impunity, and points them at the population. A child of mine will not be a statistic on a human rights report, a body in a mass grave, or a target for men in uniform who have forgotten who they are paid to protect. My refusal is their immunity. 2. I refuse to give the political class one more soul to exploit, disenfranchise and suppress for their personal gain. This is the universal political transaction. In Nigeria, they steal the budget for healthcare and buy private jets. In Russia, they silence dissent with a cup of tea laced with polonium. In North Korea, 3 generations of a family are sent to a labour camp for the crime of a single critical thought. From the petty local chairman who embezzles funds meant for a village well, to the supreme leader who builds marble palaces while his people eat grass, the political class is a global parasite. It feeds on the lifeblood of the masses. My child will not be born as livestock for this permanent transnational ruling class. They will not be a unit of labour, a source of tax, a vote to be bought, or a body to be suppressed. 3. I refuse to give God another soul to send to hell or use as a subject for eternal judgment. Whether this deity exists or is a monstrous fiction of human imagination, the risk is non-negotiable. The Abrahamic God, as I have dissected, is a cosmic sadistic tyrant who creates beings for the purpose of worship and threatens them with eternal torture for failure. I will not hand an innocent soul to this divine blackmailer. My child will be safe from heaven and hell alike, resting in the perfect peace of non-being. 4. I refuse to give a judgmental and rigid society one more soul to forcefully condition, shame, and mould into unfulfilling traditional norms. From the moment of birth, the box is prepared, a box of gender, a box of religion, a box of acceptable ambition. The unique, chaotic beauty of a human consciousness is systematically crushed into a prefabricated shape. My child will not be a prisoner of tradition, forced to live a life scripted by the dead. 5. I refuse to give terrorists, bandits, and kidnappers one more soul to terrorize, ransom, or traumatize in an insecure environment. Safety is a luxury that billions cannot afford. What is the crime of a child born in Gaza? To have their first memory be the whistle of an Israeli bomb, their last sight be a concrete ceiling rushing towards their face. What is the crime of a schoolgirl in Chibok, Nigeria, kidnapped by Boko Haram for the sin of wanting an education? The answer is existence itself. My child will not be a victim of a drone strike, a suicide bomber, a terrorist, or a counter-terrorism operation. They will not be a name on a memorial that will be forgotten by the next news cycle. 6. I refuse to give a failing healthcare system one more soul to lose due to a lack of basic equipment, oxygen, or professional care. To love a child and watch them gasp for air because the hospital has no oxygen is a specific kind of hell. To know they died of a preventable illness a rich person would have survived is a cosmic injustice. My child will not suffer from the crime of being born poor in a nation with a collapsed infrastructure. 7. I refuse to give a crumbling education sector one more soul to miseducate in dilapidated classrooms or delay through constant strikes. In Nigeria, a university student enters school at 18 and graduates at 25, having spent half of those years at home because the lecturers are on strike. In Afghanistan, a girl is barred from the classroom entirely by the Taliban, her thirst for knowledge declared a crime against God. In inner city America, a child attends a school that is a pipeline to prison, with metal detectors at the entrance and outdated textbooks that teach them nothing but their own marginalization. Education, which should be the great liberator, has become a global sorting mechanism. It is a system designed to fail the poor, to warehouse the young, and to crush the curious spirit into a compliant, debt-ridden worker. My child will not spend their formative years running on an academic treadmill that leads either to unemployment,
indoctrination, or a bullet. 8. I refuse to give the judicial system one more soul to deny justice or keep languishing in a waiting trial for years. For the poor there is no justice, only the law. Prison is not rehabilitation, it is abandonment. My child will not be forgotten in a cell for a crime they could not afford to prove they didn't commit. 9. I refuse to give the power sector one more soul to live in perpetual darkness while paying for estimated bills. In Nigeria, we know this particular madness intimately. Sitting in suffocating darkness, listening to the hum of a neighbour's generator you cannot afford to fuel, and yet receiving an electricity bill at the end of the month. In South Africa, load shedding has become a normalised ritual of communal decay. Infrastructure is the skeleton of the modern world, and the skeleton is cracking. My child will not be a citizen of a dystopia where the basic promises of the 20th century have been revoked without notice. They will not do their homework by candlelight, not for atmosphere, but because the grid has failed them again. 10. I refuse to give runaway inflation and currency devaluation one more soul to starve or deprive of basic nutrition. To work and not be able to afford a loaf of bread. To watch the value of your labour evaporate while a cabal of economic overlords plays games with your national currency. My child will not know the gut-wrenching pain of hunger in a land of plenty, or the humiliation of watching their parents' hard work mean nothing. 11. I refuse to give a stagnant labour market one more soul to frustrate after years of hard work and university degrees. To be overqualified and underemployed is the modern condition. It is a machine that creates hope and then systematically crushes it. My child will not be forced to write hundreds of applications that disappear into a digital void, their potential treated as worthless surplus. 12. I refuse to give religious institutions one more soul to manipulate through fear, guilt, or the commercialization of hope. The same system that threatens eternal fire sells the insurance policy against it. It is the greatest protection racket in history. My child will not be a psychological hostage, trading their rational mind and hard-earned money for a lottery ticket to a paradise that does not exist. 13. I refuse to give the Japa cycle one more soul to lose to the diaspora, forced to flee their home just to find a dignified life. To be a refugee from a nation you love, to learn a foreign accent, to be treated like a human being, this is a profound spiritual dislocation. My child will not be born in exile, with the soil of a stranger's country as their only hope for a dignified life. 14. I refuse to give toxic patriarchy one more soul to crush, silence, or mould into outdated gender roles. A girl is born and the world immediately begins to shrink her. In Afghanistan, the shrinking is literal, a girl-sized cage of fabric and edicts. In Nigeria, she is told to cook for her brothers, to sit like a lady, to prepare for a husband who will own her labour and her body. In South Korea, she is harassed by a hidden camera in a public bathroom, and the state shrugs. A boy is born and the world immediately begins to hollow him out. Men don't cry, men don't feel, men conquer. He is turned into a weapon or a wallet, a stone statue incapable of tenderness. My daughter will not have her wings clipped by a global machine of gendered control. My son will not have his heart turned to stone. I will not subject a soul to this ancient, boring, and murderous war of the sexes before they can even speak. 15. I refuse to give tribalists and bigots one more soul to indoctrinate with senseless hate and ethnic division. In Nigeria, it's a Fulani against Birom, Hausa against Igbo, 1,000 microaggressions over a billion-year-old grudge about a piece of land. In India, the Hindu nationalist beats the Muslim with a brick and calls it patriotism. In Myanmar, the military, with the blessing of monks, burns a Rohingya village and calls it ethnic cleansing. In America, the white supremacist marches with a tiki torch, chanting about being replaced, while the black child learns that his skin is a target. They are all taught to punch down, to find a scapegoat, to
direct their impotent rage at another struggling human instead of at the masters who engineer their poverty. My child will not be a pawn in this dirty global chess game where the prize is stolen resources and the sacrifice is human solidarity. 16. I refuse to give poorly maintained roads and infrastructure one more soul to take in a preventable accident. A trip to the market should not be a literal gamble with death. Crumbling roads, unmaintained vehicles, a total lack of emergency services. This is a state-sponsored lottery of tragedy. My child will not become a statistic on a government's failure to provide the absolute basics of a functional society. 17. I refuse to give environmental polluters one more soul to breathe in soot or drink poison water without accountability. The Niger Delta is a monument to this crime. Generations of children born into an environment saturated with toxins because of corporate greed and government complicity. Their birthright is respiratory disease and poisoned water. My child will not be born to be slowly killed by the very air and water around them, with no one to hold accountable. 18. I refuse to give mental health stigma one more soul to isolate, shame, and deny the professional care they deserve. The trauma is real, but the culture says, pray it away, you are possessed, or be a man. A broken leg is treated faster than a broken mind. My child will not suffer silently in a society that mocks their invisible wounds. Their pain will not be an object of ridicule. 19. I refuse to give the cycle of generational trauma one more soul to inherit the unhealed wounds and burdens of their ancestors. What is not transformed is transferred. The silent rage, the unresolved grief, the dysfunctional patterns of love is an inheritance heavier than any debt. This curse ends with me. The buck stops. My bloodline of trauma dies here, with my voluntary conscious extinction. 20. I refuse to give the ruling elite one more worker to exploit for a minimum wage that cannot afford a basic standard of living. A living wage is a cosmic joke when the official minimum won't pay for a single room, a basic meal, and transport to a job that grinds your soul into dust. My child will not be a serf in a neo-feudal economy, working for a master class that has perfected the art of legalized slavery. 21. I refuse to give international creditors one more citizen to inherit a staggering national debt they had no hand in creating. Born into a country that is already mortgaged to the hilt by a thieving political class, with the IMF and World Bank holding the deed to their future, my child will not be born with a chain around their neck, forged by the greed of their own leaders. 22. I refuse to give hustle culture one more life to consume, forcing a human being to spend every waking hour merely surviving rather than living. The glorification of the grind is a symptom of a collective disease. It is the insomniac prayer of a society that knows no rest, no reflection, no joy, just an endless frantic scramble for the next meal. My child will not be a rat in a maze where the cheese is a myth. 23. I refuse to give the gender war another soul to divide, radicalize, and weaponize against others in a cycle of endless resentment. A child is born. Before they understand their own heart, the world hands them a battle uniform. The girl is given a banner of victimhood and a sword of suspicion. The boy is given a shield of stoicism and the invisible wound of being inherently toxic. They are born into a miserable digital crossfire of genders, blaming each other for the crimes of a patriarchal system that is older than any of them. The algorithms feed the rage, radicalizing the lonely teenage boy into a misogynist cult and the hurt young woman into a defensive, isolating tribalism. They are taught to see the other half of humanity as a problem to be solved, a threat to be managed, an enemy to be defeated. My child will not be born into this cold war of the sexes. They will not be a soldier in a battle that should never have been fought, recruited before they could even consent to the war. 24. I refuse to give the black tax system one more individual to be weighed down by the financial burdens that a functional state should carry. You escape, you get the degree, get the job, cross the ocean, build the life, and then the phone rings. It is a cousin's school fees, an uncle's hospital bill, a funeral for a great aunt you never met. The village's well has been broken. A roof has caved in after a storm. The state is a ghost, a phantom, an absence. Its entire social contract, healthcare, education, housing, pension, has been privatized onto the backs of the fortunate ones. You are not a person. You are a walking insurance policy for an entire lineage. Your success is not your own. It is a resource to be mined by the desperation of those you love, until you are exhausted, resentful, and as broken as the system you are subsidizing. This is the black tax. It is not generosity, it is redirected debt, a systemic failure rebranded as filial piety. My child will not be a walking wallet for the failures of a state they never elected. 25. I refuse to give jungle justice and mob mentality one more potential victim in a society where the rule of law is often absent. A mistake, a misunderstood argument, a false accusation from a rival and a human being is a burning tire in the middle of the road, surrounded by a cheering mob turned judge, jury and executioner. My child will not be fuel for this collective psychosis. 26. I refuse to give the culture of fraud and get-rich-quick schemes one more youth to be pressured into crime because legitimate paths are blocked. When the society makes honest work a fool's game, it sanctifies crime as a survival tactic. It creates spiritual and financial damage that ripples outward. My child will not be caught in the riptide between a corrupt legitimate order and an alluring destructive escape route. 27. I refuse to give gender-based violence statistics one more soul to be abused or disregarded by a system that fails to protect the vulnerable. A world where the victim is shamed, the predator is often protected, and justice is a foreign concept. My child, my daughter, my son will not be reduced to a number on a grim tally sheet, a lament from a powerless NGO. 28. I refuse to give moral hypocrites one more life to judge and monitor while they ignore grand-scale corruption and systemic rot. This is the dark art of misdirection. The same politician in Nigeria who calls for legislation against indecent dressing is the one embezzling the funds meant to clothe the naked. The same American evangelical screaming about the sanctity of life in the womb is the one supporting the cutting of food stamps for the already born child. They obsess over the microscopic sins of the powerless to distract from the infinite cosmic crimes of the powerful. They dissect your hemline while ignoring the stolen trillions. My child will not be policed by these global hypocrites, their private choices dissected by a ruling class that has no morals beyond the acquisition of power. 29. I refuse to give the climate crisis and recurring floods one more person to suffer through environmental displacement and loss. The world is burning, the seasons are broken, and the poorest, who contributed the least, are being swept away by floods or starved by droughts. It is a preview of apocalypse. My child will not be a climate refugee in their own land, their future washed away by a crisis they didn't create. 30. I refuse to give pharmaceutical cartels one more patient to be sold fake or substandard drugs due to a lack of regulatory oversight. Sickness is profitable. A fake drug is murder by spreadsheet. My child will not fight for their life against malaria or typhoid, only for their final hope, a packet of medicine, to be chalk and poison sold by a cartel protected by the very government that should regulate it. The ethics of refusal. This chapter is a courtroom. The defendant is the act of procreation. The plaintiff is the unborn child, represented by the antinatalist conscience. The jury is the reader, who must decide whether the evidence presented in the preceding chapters is sufficient to convict. The closing argument follows. The core argument formalized. The antinatalist position, as articulated in this codex, can be reduced to a simple syllogism. 1. The consent principle. It is morally impermissible to impose significant risk of severe harm on a being without that being's consent. 2. The guarantee of harm. Existence imposes guaranteed, severe harms on every living being. Pain, fear, decay, and death are universal. Extreme suffering is a statistical certainty for a significant percentage of the born. 3. The impossibility of consent. The unborn cannot consent to existence. Consent obtained after birth is retroactive and invalid, as it is provided by a being who has already been irrevocably placed in the condition and has developed a survival instinct that biases their judgment. 4. Therefore, procreation is morally impermissible. This is the spine of the argument. It does not rely on religion, emotion, or personal trauma. It relies on a principle that almost every ethical system already accepts, that we should not gamble with the welfare of others without their permission. The only exception the natalist world carves out is for the most consequential gamble of all, the gamble of existence itself. The asymmetry of pleasure and pain. A deeper, more rigorous formulation comes from the philosopher David Benatar, whose asymmetry argument provides the most devastating logical tool in the anti-natalist arsenal. It can be summarized as follows. The presence of pain is bad, all agree on this. The presence of pleasure is good, all agree on this. The absence of pain is good, even if that good is not enjoyed by anyone. If there were a child who was never born, and therefore never experienced the agony of bone cancer, that absence of agony is good. The universe is better for not containing that suffering. The absence of pleasure is not bad unless there is someone for whom this absence is a deprivation. If there is no child, the absence of the pleasure of a birthday party is not a loss. There is no ghostly child in the void weeping for the cake it never tasted. This asymmetry means that the avoidance of suffering has a moral weight that the absence of pleasure does not. Bringing a child into existence creates a being who can suffer, and that suffering is real, concrete harm. Refraining from bringing a child into existence does not create a being who is deprived of pleasure. The pleasure is simply not needed, because there is no one to need it. In the balanced scales of ethics, the guaranteed harms of existence always outweigh the potential pleasures, because the harms are suffered by a real being, while the missed pleasures are missed by no one. Anticipating and dismantling counter-arguments. Every philosophy must face its critics. What follows is a systematic anticipation and refutation of every major objection the natalist world can raise. The goal is not to win a debate. The goal is to leave the objection in ashes, so that no reader who has followed the argument this far can retreat into comfortable, unexamined rebuttals. Counter-argument 1. But life is a gift. This is the most common and the most intellectually bankrupt of all natalist arguments. It is not an argument at all. It is a slogan, an unexamined cultural reflex. Let us examine the nature of a gift. A genuine gift is offered freely. It can be refused without penalty. The giver does not impose the gift on the recipient and then demand gratitude for the imposition. If I place a heavy, unwanted object in your arms and say, "This is a gift," you have the right to decline it. If I strap it to your back while you are unconscious, and then when you wake, demand your thanks for the burden, I am not a giver. I am an assailant. Existence is not offered, it is imposed. The child does not accept the gift is forced upon them in an act of unilateral, irreversible violence. And the child is then trained from the moment of language to say thank you. This is not a gift, this is an obligation disguised as a blessing. The proper response to an unwanted, unrefusable imposition is not gratitude, it is refusal. And the only way to refuse the gift of life is to never bestow it. Counter-argument 2. What if the child is happy to be alive? This is the retroactive consent argument, and it collapses under scrutiny. A person who already exists and who has developed a powerful biological attachment to their own existence is not a neutral evaluator of the ethics of their birth. The survival instinct is one of the most important forces in the animal kingdom. The will to live is hardwired into the brain by the same genes that benefit from continued existence. This is not consent, this is Stockholm Syndrome. The hostage, after years of captivity, may come to love the hostage taker. The prisoner may find meaning in the prison, but the hostage's affection does not retroactively justify the initial kidnapping. The prisoner's adaptation does not make the cell a gift. A happy life is a life in which the compensations have, for a time, succeeded in distracting from the underlying condition. The pleasure is real, the love is real, but the death at the end is real. The pain that preceded the pleasure was real. The gamble that was taken with a non-consenting being was real, and a gamble does not become ethical retroactively because it happened to pay out. Moreover, for every happy child there is a child who is not happy, a child who is trafficked, a child who is bombed, a child who is born with a disease that causes unremitting agony until death at the age of 4. The gamble of birth is not just taken without consent, it is taken without knowledge of the outcome. It is a blind bet on another person's life, and the natalist placing this bet has no skin in the game. If the child suffers horribly, the natalist can offer sympathy. They cannot offer a refund. Counter-argument 3. But antinatalism would lead to human extinction. This is the most common attempted reductio ad absurdum, and it is not a counter-argument at all. It is a statement of consequence, dressed up as a moral objection. The antinatalist replies, yes, it would, and what is the problem? Human extinction is a tragedy for no one. There is no future generation weeping in the void for its cancelled existence. There is no cosmic audience that will mourn the absence of human art, human love, human achievement. The universe is indifferent. It has witnessed the rise and fall of countless species, and it will witness the rise and fall of ours with the same silent, unblinking gaze. Extinction is only a tragedy from the perspective of the already living, who are biologically wired to fear death and project that fear onto the species as a whole. But the species is not a person. It does not suffer. It does not die. It simply stops. And when it stops, all human suffering stops with it. The end of the human species is the end of genocide, and the end of slavery, the end of torture, the end of grief, the end of every tear that has ever been shed. This is not a dystopia. This is mercy. The natalist who argues, but we would go extinct, is arguing in effect that the continuation of suffering is preferable to its cessation. They are arguing that the abstract idea of humanity matters more than the concrete suffering of actual humans. This is not ethics. This is species narcissism. Counter-argument 4. But this philosophy is born of despair. You're just depressed. This is the ad hominem objection. It attacks the philosopher, not the philosophy. It is logically irrelevant. The truth value of a statement is independent of the emotional state of the person stating it. The antinatalist position does not rely on the emotional state of the antinatalist. It relies on the asymmetry of pleasure and pain, the impossibility of consent, and the guaranteed harms of existence. These arguments stand or fall on their own logical merits. If the reader believes that the antinatalist is depressed, the reader is invited to examine the arguments, not the author's biography. Moreover, the charge of despair misrepresents the emotional reality of antinatalism as lived. There is a profound peace in refusing the gamble. There is a dignity in saying no. The antinatalist is not necessarily the one who cannot find meaning in life. The antinatalist may be the one who finds life meaningful enough for themselves, but refuses to roll the dice for another. This is not despair. This is the highest form of compassion. Counter-argument 5. But we can fix the world. Things are getting better. This is the meliorist argument. Empirically, the claim that the world is improving is selectively blind. Yes, some metrics have improved. Child mortality has declined in some regions, but the absolute number of suffering beings continues to grow. The climate is collapsing. The oceans are acidifying. The soil is eroding. And even the improvements are fragile, dependent on complex systems that could collapse under the weight of political instability, resource depletion, or pandemic. But even if the world were improving, the improvement would not justify the gamble. A game of Russian roulette does not become ethical because you have removed one bullet from a 6-chambered gun. The odds have improved. The nature of the gamble, an unconsented, irreversible risk of catastrophic harm remains unchanged. To bet a child's life on the hope of a better world is to gamble with stakes that do not belong to you. And the deepest refutation, the better world the meliorist imagines, is a world with less suffering. But the only world with no suffering is the world with no sentient beings. The antinatalist is not working against the meliorist. The antinatalist has already arrived at the destination the meliorist claims to be walking toward. Counter-argument 6. But my religion commands me to be fruitful and multiply. The relevant point here is simple. A divine command is not a moral justification. It is an appeal to authority, and the authority in question is a being whose existence is unproven, whose moral character is deeply suspect, and whose commands have been used to justify every atrocity in human history. If the reader believes that a deity has commanded them to reproduce, the reader is invited to examine whether the command is consistent with the character of a loving being. A loving father does not create children for the purpose of worship, threaten them with eternal torture for failure, and call it a gift. The Abrahamic God, as demonstrated, is not a moral authority. He's a cosmic loan shark. His command do not bind the conscience of anyone who has not already surrendered their reason to fear. Counter-argument 7. But it is natural. The animals do it. It's part of life. This is the naturalistic fallacy, the belief that what is natural is therefore good. Cancer is natural. Earthquakes are natural. Infanticide is natural. Widely practiced by lions, dolphins, and primates. The fact that something occurs in nature is not an argument for its ethical permissibility. Human beings are not merely natural creatures. We are ethical creatures. We are capable of reflecting on our instincts and refusing to obey them. We do not eat everything we crave. We do not strike everyone who angers us. We do not defecate wherever the urge takes us. We override nature constantly. The question is not whether reproduction is natural. The question is whether it is ethical. And the answer, for the reasons given above, is no. Counter-argument 8. But what if the child would have been a genius, a saint, a saviour of humanity? This is a variation on the lottery argument, and it fails for the same reason. The probability of any given child becoming a transformative genius is infinitesimally small. The probability of any given child experiencing significant suffering is close to 1. To bet a child's welfare on a 1 in a million chance of greatness is not a moral calculation. It is a fantasy. And even if the child were to become a genius, a cure for cancer, a peacemaker, an artistic prodigy, the child would still suffer. They would still age. They would still watch their loved ones die. They would still, in the end, die themselves. The greatness does not cancel the suffering. It coexists with it. Beethoven composed the Ninth Symphony whilst deaf, isolated, and frequently despairing. His genius was real. His suffering was real. His birth was not retroactively justified by his music. It was a gamble that paid out for the species and cost the man. I will not gamble a child's life on the possibility that they might become Beethoven. I will let the silence remain unbroken, and in that silence there will be no suffering and no need for the compensations of genius. The ethical conclusion, the only true mercy. The arguments are complete, the counter-arguments are ashes, the illusions have been stripped, the biology dissected, the silence described. What remains is the irreducible core of the antinatalist ethic and the mercy that flows from it. To bring a child into existence is to impose a lifetime of guaranteed suffering on a non-consenting being in exchange for pleasures that are uncertain, temporary, and ultimately extinguished by death. The gamble is taken with the child's entire existence, but the gambler has much to lose as well. Parents surrender freedom, money, time, sleep, peace, and often their health and happiness. Reproduction is a lose-lose gamble. The creator pays a substantial price, and the created bears the risks of existence itself. The ethical parent is the one who recognizes this and chooses not to parent. The ethical lineage is the one that ends. The ethical future is the one that contains no more children, no more suffering, no more death. It is the future of the silence before birth, extended indefinitely. I am an ethical being. I refuse to gamble. My children will never suffer, because my children will never be. This is not a failure of love. This is the only possible victory of love in a universe that is fundamentally hostile to the beloved. Look at the architecture of the lie one more time. A child is born. They are conditioned from their first breath by parents, by schools, by priests, by a culture saturated in toxic positivity to believe in the just world fallacy. They are taught that hard work guarantees success, that virtue is rewarded, and that they are the authors of their own destiny. This is a monstrous act of intellectual sabotage, because when the system breaks them, as it does for the vast majority, they are left with no external enemy. They only have the lesson they internalized. The fault must be in me. I am a failure. I deserve this. The parents, the society, the culture that wrote a check on a child's behalf that reality could not cash, they all step back. The child is left holding the exploded bomb of their own life, taking full responsibility for a world they did not build. The glory was shared, but the toxic radioactive shame is theirs and theirs alone. I refuse to co-sign this fraudulent loan, and the alternative is no better. Even if they succeed, the body will fail them. The fear will stalk them from the first breath to the last. They will end their days in a bed that is not theirs, in a room that smells of antiseptic and despair, waiting for a hand to turn them so they don't get bed sores, waiting for a voice that is not irritated by their frailty. This is the promised end. This is the cosmic punchline to the joke of living. This is not nihilism. The nihilist says nothing matters. I say the suffering that is guaranteed by birth matters tremendously. It matters so much that I refuse to be its agent. This is the ultimate ethical stand, to have the power to create a need machine, a human being that will require food, safety, love, purpose and dignity, and to say, I will not create that need in a world incapable of satisfying it. This is not selfishness. The selfish act is to birth a child, to solve your own loneliness, to secure your own legacy, to create a miniature version of yourself, to soothe your own existential dread. The child is the tool. The parent's ego is the project. The childless act, in this context, is a shield. It is a Bodhisattva-like vow taken at the gates of hell, promising not to enter paradise until we can take everyone with us, starting with the ones we would have brought. But this is not about paradise. It is about preventing hell. My children are the only perfectly safe beings in existence. They have never known a single moment of pain, fear, or grief. They have never been hungry. They have never been betrayed. They have never felt the cold hand of loneliness or the hot sting of shame. They are at peace, perfect, permanent, unbreakable peace. I have given them the only perfect gift a parent can give, a closed door to a world that would have consumed them. The 30 refusals are a funeral rite for a future that will not happen. The circle of guilt is broken. The despotism of DNA is overthrown. The illusions of meaning are stripped bare. The silence before birth remains unbroken, and it is good. Afterword. This codex is complete. What began as a cry of refusal has become a system. What was once a wound has become a weapon. What was once a private, silent decision to let my bloodline die in my hands has become a public, unapologetic, unassailable philosophy. I have not written this book to convert the happy breeder. The happy breeder is beyond conversion, insulated by biology, culture, and the unbreachable firewall of personal exceptionalism. I have written this book for the hesitant, for the person lying awake at 3 a.m, feeling the immense, suffocating pressure to reproduce, but haunted by a quiet, persistent voice that says, is this right? Is this fair? This book is that voice amplified. It is permission. It is the antidote to a million years of conditioning. I have written this book for the already born who struggle under the weight of existence, who have been told that their suffering is a test, a lesson, a part of some grand cosmic plan. This book is for them too. It is a witness. It says, I see your exhaustion. I will not add to it. I will not create another tired soul and force them to carry a burden they did not ask for. Some will call this despair. They are wrong. The word they are looking for is clarity. Despair is the wound. This codex is the diagnosis. You do not call a surgeon hopeless for cutting out a tumour. You call them precise. The tumour here is the delusion that existence is a gift, that suffering is redeemed by pleasure, that the gamble of birth is justified by the occasional jackpot. I have cut out the tumour. What remains is clean, hard and true. Some will call this selfishness. They are wrong. The selfish act is to birth a child to solve your own loneliness, to secure your own legacy, to create a miniature version of yourself, to soothe your existential dread. The selfish act is to roll the dice with another person's life because you are afraid of being alone, afraid of being forgotten, afraid of facing your own mortality, without the distraction of a dependent. The child is the tool, the parent's ego is the project. I have refused to be that parent. I am a hole in the tapestry of existence, a broken link in the chain of years of replication, a dead end. I say this not with shame, but with a grim, quiet satisfaction. The chain of DNA, a chain of fear and trauma and exploitation, passed down from the first amoeba, breaks in my hands. My ancestors could not break it. They did not know they could. They were too hungry, too afraid, too indoctrinated. I am not. I know. I see the trap, and I refuse to spring it for another generation. Let the code of life write a new, kinder chapter. Mine ends here. The buck of millennial suffering stops on my watch, in my blood. This is not a cry. This is a conclusion. I am agnostic. I am antinatalist. I am the dead end. And I have never been more at peace. Written in black light against the crime of creation, the black light. Henry Alibi is a writer and philosopher committed to the most radical form of protest, non-participation. A long-time critic of sacred certainties and systemic cruelties, he turns his black light on the final dogma, the supposed virtue of existence itself. He lives in Nigeria.